The chamber is open, and the air is thick with whispers. Here's the question that changes everything. What if Harry Potter never went to Privet Drive? What if, on that freezing night in November 1981, Albus Dumbledore chose differently? Not a suburban doorstep, not a letter and a blanket and a hope that a child could survive being unwanted. What if he placed 15-month-old Harry with a wizarding family who would actually take him in with open arms? Not because it would be easy, because it wouldn't. The Weasleys weren't rich. They weren't powerful. They didn't have polished connections or quiet manners and private wards that hummed like bank vaults. They had a crooked, expanding house held together by love, stubbornness, and the kind of practical magic you learn when you have to make something work. They already had 6 boys, 6 loud, hungry, reckless boys with red hair and quick hands and a habit of turning any room into chaos within minutes. Taking Harry would stretch every seam of their lives. Food, space, sleep, safety, reputation. It would paint a target on a family that already stood out in a society that measured worth in gold and bloodlines. And still, they would do it. Because that was the Weasley way. Not noble in the tidy, glamorous sense people like to print in newspapers. Noble in the exhausting, everyday sense. The kind that meant feeding another mouth even when the pantry looked thin. The kind that meant choosing love when fear had every reason to shout louder. This timeline isn't a smooth one. It doesn't erase danger. It doesn't make Voldemort less monstrous, or the wizarding world less judgmental, or the war less brutal when it returns. But it changes Harry, because childhood shapes you. Love shapes you. Belonging shapes you. Canon Harry arrived at Hogwarts desperate to be chosen by someone, anyone. Loyal because he was starving. Brave because he'd been taught. By neglect, by cruelty, by silence. That his life was disposable. He fought like someone with nothing to lose because, in his mind, he didn't. This Harry is still brave. He's still Harry. That part is threaded into him like bone. But his bravery grows from a different root. He learns he's loved before he learns he's famous. He learns the feeling of being pulled into a messy kitchen hug. He learns the sound of laughter bouncing off crooked walls. He learns what it's like to be defended, scolded, forgiven, fed, and kissed on the forehead even after he's been a menace. He learns family before legend. And that changes every crisis that comes later, not because he's protected from them, but because he never faces them alone. So let's go back to the night it all begins. November 1st, 1981. The Burrow, Devon. Near midnight, Albus Dumbledore stood at the Weasley kitchen table with the quiet gravity of a man carrying a choice that would echo for decades. Arthur Weasley was on his feet, tense and pale, as if his whole body had turned into a question he didn't want answered. Molly Weasley sat stiffly at the table, hands pressed together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes were already red. She'd been crying since the moment Dumbledore spoke Lily and James's names, with the finality of grief. On the staircase, 6 boys hovered in a cluster of pajamas and bare feet and wide eyes, too young to understand everything, but old enough to know that something enormous had stepped into their house. Bill, 10, was the steadiest of them, standing like he thought he could anchor the others by sheer force of responsibility. Charlie gripped the banister hard. Percy's lips moved, as though he was silently counting facts, trying to make order out of dread. The twins, 5 and identical, were unusually still, watching with the sharp, curious intensity they usually saved for trouble. And baby Ron, barely more than a toddler, leaned into Bill's side with the sleepy, confused trust of someone who didn't yet know how quickly a life could change. In Dumbledore's arms was a small bundle of blankets, a child sleeping in uneven breaths, a child with hair that refused to lie flat, a child with a fresh, angry red lightning scar across his forehead, like a brand pressed into skin by fate. "I know what I'm asking," Dumbledore said quietly, and for once his voice held no performance at all, no twinkle, no gentle humor, only a tired sincerity. "I know what it would cost you." Molly pushed back her chair so fast it scraped the floor. "Let me see him." Dumbledore didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and carefully placed the baby into her arms. Harry stirred immediately, as if his body recognized change even in sleep. A soft sound left him, half protest, half fear. "Oh, love," Molly whispered, like the words were instinct and prayer at once. "You're so little. 15 months, Dumbledore confirmed. Arthur swallowed hard. "And there's no one else?" "There are names on paper," Dumbledore said. "But paper doesn't raise a child." He didn't say Sirius Black's name at first. He didn't say Azkaban. He didn't say the shape of betrayal as the Ministry had declared it. But Arthur was not a stupid man, and Molly had lived through a war. They heard the gaps and understood them. "James and Lily named Sirius Black guardian in their will," Dumbledore continued, voice careful in the way people are careful around sharp objects. "But Black has been arrested, accused of their murder and of killing Peter Pettigrew." Molly's grip tightened around Harry. "Accused," she repeated, like the word itself tasted bitter. "The Longbottoms?" Arthur asked, though something in his face suggested he already knew the answer. Dumbledore paused, just a breath. Then, "Frank and Alice are not able to take him." Arthur's shoulders slumped, the way they do when a person hears something they didn't want confirmed. Molly's eyes flashed. "Not able," she echoed, voice suddenly edged, meaning they were tortured. Dumbledore didn't deny it. His silence was an agreement heavy enough to fill the room. A thin, furious sound left Molly, half sob, half anger. She looked down at the baby in her arms as though she could shield him from every terrible thing the world had already done. Arthur took a slow breath. His aunt, Lily's sister, Petunia Dursley, Dumbledore said, and this time there was a faint hardness behind the name. "She lives with her husband, Vernon. They have a son. They'll take him," Arthur said. But it sounded like hope rather than certainty. "They will not," Dumbledore replied, calm and blunt. "I observed them for a full day." Vernon Dursley spoke about freaks and abnormality in front of Harry. Petunia referred to Lily as that dreadful girl and showed no desire, none, to take responsibility for Lily's child. Molly's face went still in the way it did right before her temper rose. "So you were going to leave him there anyway?" Dumbledore met her gaze without flinching. "Blood protection is powerful magic," he said. "Lily's sacrifice can extend through her sister's blood, but protection, purchased by turning a child into an unwanted burden," his voice dipped. "That is not protection. That is another kind of harm." Arthur stared at the baby, at the scar, at the small, helpless curve of Harry's cheek pressed into Molly's jumper. "So," he said slowly, "you've come here." "Yes." The kitchen seemed to tighten around the word. "You want us," Arthur continued, "to raise Harry Potter." Dumbledore nodded. "I am asking if you would give him a home. Not as a symbol, not as a headline, as a child." On the staircase, Bill shifted slightly, baby Ron heavy on his hip. His eyes were fixed on Harry, with a seriousness far beyond 10. Molly rocked Harry gently, the motion automatic. "We don't have much," she said, and the words were honest, not self-pitying. 6 boys already. We're scraping by some months as it is. Hogwarts fees alone. Merlin, Albus. How would we possibly... Harry's parents left him provided for, Dumbledore said. I cannot access those funds on his behalf for you. It would not be right. But the ministry does have support for war orphans, and I can ensure the paperwork moves as it should. I can also, Arthur's voice sharpened, if we take him, it won't be for gold. Dumbledore's expression softened, just a fraction. I know. I'm not offering payment. I'm telling you your fear is practical, and practicality does not have to become the reason you say no. Molly looked down again. Harry's eyelashes fluttered. His mouth opened in a tiny, uncertain shape, as if he was searching for something he couldn't name. The scar on his forehead looked too harsh for a face that young. Molly had loved Lily Potter from the edges of war. Order meetings, whispered plans, brief moments of laughter that mattered because everything else was danger. Lily had been fierce in the way only young mothers could be fierce, fighting for a future she might never see, fighting anyway. Molly could not bring Lily back, but she could refuse to let Lily's child grow up cold. She inhaled, steadying herself. Then she spoke as if there had never truly been any other answer. We'll take him. Arthur turned to her, and for a moment his face held 100 thoughts: fear, worry, pride, the weight of responsibility. Then he looked at Harry and exhaled. We will, Arthur agreed quietly. We'll take him. Dumbledore's shoulders eased, like he'd been carrying something too heavy and had finally set part of it down. Thank you, he said, and he meant it. Molly's eyes narrowed slightly. And the blood protection? It can be maintained, Dumbledore said, not in the exact shape it would take with Petunia's home. But there are other ways. Guardianship matters. Intent matters. Wards can be layered. The Burrow already has protections. Older ones. Stubborn ones. I will add to them. I will place a Fidelius charm on this location. Arthur, you will be secret keeper. Arthur blinked. The Fidelius. Here. Yes. And Voldemort's followers? Molly asked. Some are imprisoned, Dumbledore said. Some are free. Some will search for meaning in his fall, and some will search for revenge. If they can find Harry, they will try. Arthur's jaw set. Then we make sure they can't find him. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, then nodded. There is another part of this, he said, and the air shifted again. If Harry lives here, he will still be Harry Potter. The press will come. The ministry will talk. People will have opinions you didn't ask for. They will say, you're using him. They will say, you're making a statement. They will drag your name into their arguments. Molly's face hardened in that unmistakable way that told every one of her sons they had pushed too far. Let them talk, she said. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it for him. On the stairs, Bill's voice drifted down, small but firm. Does he hesitated, cheeks pink. Does he have pajamas? The question broke the tension like a crack of sunlight through cloud. Molly stared, then huffed a laugh that threatened to turn into tears again. I don't think he does. Bill nodded, as if this was a solvable problem, which for him it was. Ron's got spare ones. I'll get them. He disappeared upstairs with purpose. Charlie padded down a step, clutching a soft stuffed dragon that looked like it had already survived several battles. He held it out awkwardly. He might want this, he said, if he wakes up. And, you know, it's new. Percy appeared behind him with a thin children's book, the kind designed to teach letters and simple charms. He should have educational materials, Percy announced, as if this was the most important part of the situation. Fred and George, who had been quiet for far too long, suddenly produced 2 teddy bears, one green, one orange, and shoved them into view. He needs to pick, one declared. Which one's better? The other insisted. Molly stared at her sons. at their earnestness, their strange little attempts to help, and something inside her chest loosened. "Fine," she said, voice thick. "Bring them. All of it. He can pick tomorrow." Dumbledore reached into his robes and drew out official papers, sealed and neat. "These will formalize guardianship," he said. "The ministry will process them immediately. I have already spoken to the minister. This solution will stand." Arthur took the quill, signed. Molly signed one-handed, with Harry tucked safely against her, using a bit of wandless magic to steady the page because she wasn't putting him down. Dumbledore looked at the baby again, at the scar, at the soft rise and fall of his breathing. "One more thing," he said, quieter now. "Harry remembers nothing. He will not remember his parents. He will not remember tonight. The world knows his name, but he does not. How you tell him his story, when you tell him, that will shape him as much as any magic I can put around this house." Molly nodded slowly. "We'll tell him when he's ready," she said. "Not before." Arthur's hand rested on her shoulder, and until then, he added, "He's just Harry." Dumbledore's eyes softened behind his spectacles. "Yes," he said, "until then, he's just Harry." He stood, adjusting his robes. "I'll return tomorrow to set the wards properly." For tonight, he glanced toward the stairs, toward the children hovering, toward the table still cluttered with late-night tea and ordinary mess. "For tonight, do what you already know how to do." Molly's arms tightened around the child. "Care for him," she murmured. Dumbledore's mouth curved faintly. "Exactly." When he left, the house felt different. Not quieter. Nothing in the Burrow was ever truly quiet. But the air carried a new weight, like the whole place had shifted to make room for something sacred. Arthur sent the boys back to bed, one by one, though Bill kept glancing over his shoulder, as if afraid Harry might vanish if he stopped looking. Molly stayed in the kitchen, rocking Harry gently. Arthur returned after a few minutes and stood behind her chair, hand resting on her shoulder. "You sure?" he asked softly. Molly didn't look up. "Completely." Arthur exhaled. "Then we'll do it properly." "We'll have to," Molly said. He won't be a guest." "No," Arthur agreed. "He'll be ours." Molly stood, careful, and carried Harry upstairs. Ron's nursery was small and warm, painted in soft colors, with a little mobile spinning overhead. The crib looked too empty now, too much like it had been waiting. Molly laid Harry down gently, tucking blankets around him the way she had tucked all her babies. His eyes opened. Green, unfocused, searching. He made a small sound, confused, questioning, the tiniest edge of fear. Molly placed her hand on his chest, warm and steady. "Shh," she whispered. "You're safe now. Love, you're home." Harry's eyelids fluttered, then closed again. His breathing evened. The lightning scar on his forehead caught the moonlight through the window, bright and sharp and impossible. In the doorway, Arthur watched his wife and the sleeping child, and felt the truth settle into him like stone. They had just taken in the most famous child in their world. They had just made an enemy of anyone who wanted Harry for power, for revenge, for politics, for pride. They had also given an orphan what he needed most. Not fame, not gold, not even perfect safety. Belonging. And that, Arthur knew, would change everything. Morning at the Burrow didn't arrive gently. It never did. The Burrow woke the way it lived, loud, busy, and slightly off balance, as if the house itself had opinions about how the day should begin. This morning, though, the chaos had an extra edge. There were strangers in the kitchen. 2 ministry officials in practical robes stood near the back door, speaking in low voices while they unpacked small ward stones from a padded case. Their wands flicked with careful precision, marking points along the floor and window frames. A third person, an older witch with a clipboard and a face that had learned to look neutral at everything, kept glancing at Harry, as if the sight of him made her forget what she was writing. Arthur stood near the sink, listening to Dumbledore explain things in that calm voice that somehow made every word sound like it carried a consequence. Molly, meanwhile, had Harry pressed against her shoulder, bouncing him gently as he cried in bright, confused bursts that didn't stop until she murmured the same promise again and again. "You're all right, love. You're safe. You're with us. It's okay." Harry didn't understand the words, but he understood her. He understood warmth. He understood the steady beat of her heart beneath fabric. He understood the way her hand supported his back, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. He clutched her jumper and cried anyway, because a child could be held and still be scared. Bill was already moving through the kitchen like a small adult, stepping around ministry robes and chair legs, fetching things before anyone asked. Percy hovered too, rigid and attentive, eyes wide with a kind of nervous importance. Charlie tried to help in the only way Charlie knew how, by presenting a toy dragon again, lifting it into a little swoop, as if it could distract Harry from the fact that the world was unfamiliar. Harry glanced at it mid-cry. His face scrunched. He made a sound that was almost offended. Charlie looked wounded. He doesn't like it. Fred and George appeared behind Charlie, equally fascinated and equally delighted by the idea that the famous baby could have preferences. "Maybe he prefers orange," one whispered. "Or maybe he prefers green," the other whispered back. Molly shot them a look that made both of them retreat half a step. "Not today," she said, with the weary authority of a mother who knew a disaster was always only minutes away. No experimenting. No tricks. No arguing over colors. "Ah." Arthur cleared his throat softly and leaned toward her. "I'll take Ron," he offered, because baby Ron had begun to wail too, offended by the fact that Molly's attention was occupied. Molly shifted Ron into Arthur's arms without letting go of Harry. Arthur stood there for a moment, holding one baby with one arm and trying to soothe the other baby with words. "You're still important," he told Ron, as if Ron could understand. "You're still our youngest." "Well," Ron howled louder. Arthur sighed. "All right, you're still our Ron." And somehow, Ron calmed a fraction at the sound of his own name. Dumbledore, watching this scene with a look that was half amusement and half something heavier, continued his explanation. "The Fidelius will be key to you," he said to Arthur. "Not to a place, exactly, but to the truth of it. Anyone who knows the Burrow exists will find their memory sliding away from the details. They won't be able to locate it unless you personally share the secret with them." Arthur nodded slowly. "So even neighbors will continue to know you live somewhere near Ottery St. Catchpole," Dumbledore said. "But they will not be able to pinpoint how to reach this property. They will simply fail to arrive." "And Lily's protection?" Molly asked, still bouncing Harry. "It will anchor through guardianship and through belonging," Dumbledore replied. "As long as Harry considers this his home, the magic of sacrifice will continue to wrap itself around him here. It will not be identical to what Petunia's blood might have offered, but combined with layered wards and your own existing protections." Arthur's mouth twisted. "Our existing protections are mostly Molly's temper." Molly didn't deny it. "My temper and Arthur's stubbornness," she corrected. Dumbledore's eyes warmed briefly. "Both are very effective forms of magic in their own way." One of the ministry officials cleared his throat. "The location will be flagged as restricted under ministry records," he said. "No apparition within a certain radius. Portkeys monitored. Flu access limited to trusted connections. And no one's taking my son anywhere." Molly cut in, voice sharp enough to slice parchment. Not without my say-so. The clipboard witch wrote something down quickly and did not argue. Harry's crying eased to sniffles as Molly shifted him into a conjured high chair. Temporary, made from kitchen wood and stubborn intention. He blinked at the room, like it might explain itself to him if he stared hard enough. Molly immediately began preparing food, because that was her solution to almost everything. A bit of mashed banana, soft bread torn into tiny pieces, warm milk. Harry stared at it like it was a test. Then he grabbed a piece of banana with all the fierce concentration of a child, deciding whether the world was trustworthy. He squashed it. He examined his hand. He squashed it again. Bill leaned in, fascinated. He's decisive. Babies are, Molly said, and her voice softened. They don't pretend. If they like something, you know. If they don't, you know. If they're scared, you know. She watched Harry's little fingers, watched his brow furrow, watched him finally shove a bit of banana into his mouth. His eyes widened. He chewed slowly. Then he made a pleased sound that was almost a hum. Molly's shoulders dropped a fraction. There, she whispered. That's better. An owl tapped at the window. Arthur opened it and took the newspaper that dropped into his hands like a weight. The Daily Prophet. He didn't want to read it. Not really. But he did anyway, because Arthur Weasley was the sort of man who believed you faced problems head-on, even when they were unpleasant. He unfolded it. His face went tight. Molly saw the headline from across the room. Boy who lived placed with Weasley family. Molly's jaw clenched. Already, Arthur scanned quickly. The words blurred. He didn't need to read every sentence to understand what was happening. In a surprising move, Arthur read aloud, voice strained. Albus Dumbledore has placed Harry Potter, orphan survivor of you-know-who's attack, in the care of Arthur and Molly Weasley and their 6 sons. 6, Molly said, furious. Like he's a parcel you add to the pile. Arthur kept going, because the pain of it was in the details. The Weasley family, known for modest means and their controversial. Arthur stopped, eyes narrowing. Blood traitor reputation. Molly's voice turned icy. Oh, so doing the decent thing is controversial now. Dumbledore's expression had gone hard behind his spectacles. The press will twist anything into something useful to them, he said quietly. Useful for who? Percy asked, and he sounded too young to carry the sharpness he'd already learned. The ministry, rich families, people who want a story, people who want to feel like they're better than someone else, Molly said, and she didn't bother softening it for the children. That's who. Arthur folded the paper, hands shaking slightly. They're making him a symbol, he said. He's a baby. He's not a debate. Dumbledore nodded once. Limit public exposure, he advised. For now, Molly's eyes flashed. So he lives indoors because grown adults can't behave. Better indoors than dead, Dumbledore said plainly, and that bluntness made the room go quieter. Molly stared at him, then looked at Harry's little face, still smeared faintly with banana. Her anger shifted. It didn't disappear. Molly Weasley did not do disappearing anger, but it turned into something more focused. Fine, she said. We'll be careful. But he won't be caged. Not by fear, not by headlines. Arthur's hand found her shoulder. We'll do it sensibly, he murmured. We'll keep him safe. Fred and George, who had been eerily quiet, whispered to each other. If anyone tries to hurt him, we'll. Molly snapped her head around. You will do nothing. They shut their mouths immediately, but their eyes stayed bright and determined. It was the first sign of something that would define this timeline. The fact that Harry was not an isolated child protected by one adult's secret plan. He was folded into a pack, a family, a group of boys who would grow up with him and treat him as theirs. That kind of loyalty could be dangerous. It could also be the reason he survived. After the ministry officials left, and Dumbledore finished the last of the ward work, he lingered at the door. He looked at Molly holding Harry, at Arthur with Ron on his hip, at the children peering around corners. "You've done a brave thing," Dumbledore said. Molly snorted. "We've done a normal thing. The world's just gotten used to people being cruel." Dumbledore's gaze softened. "Perhaps," he said. "But even normal kindness can change the shape of a life." He left. The house felt like it exhaled when he was gone. And then Molly Weasley turned to Arthur with the kind of expression that meant a new mission had formed in her mind. "We need supplies," she announced. Arthur blinked. "We just had wards placed, paperwork signed, newspapers delivered. None of that helps me when I realize we don't have enough nappies," Molly said briskly. "We need bottles, a proper high chair, toys that won't stab him, and Merlin, help me. We need to rearrange sleeping spaces." Arthur rubbed his forehead. "Dumbledore said to avoid." "This is Ottery St. Catchpole," Molly cut in. "Not Diagon Alley. I'm going to the village shop. I can't run a household on good intentions alone." Bill stepped forward immediately. "I'll come." "No," Molly said. "You stay and help your father with the house. Charlie, too. Percy, keep the twins from inventing a new kind of catastrophe." The twins looked offended. "We don't invent catastrophes," one said. "We improve existing ones," the other added. Molly gave them a look that promised consequences. "Percy," she repeated. Percy puffed up a little, glad to be given authority. "Yes, Mum." Molly bundled Harry into warm clothes, mostly Ron's old things that fit well enough, and left with him tucked against her, hood up, scarf wrapped, the November air sharp on her cheeks. The village shop was quiet, ordinary, and blissfully unaware of scars and prophecies. The woman behind the counter smiled at Harry as if he was just another toddler. "What a lovely boy," she said. "Is he yours?" Molly looked down at him. Harry grabbed at her scarf, curious. "He is now," Molly said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Back at the Burrow, she found Arthur and the older boys already working on the house. Magic made building faster, but Arthur insisted on doing things properly, rather than conjuring fragile walls that might collapse the next time a boy slammed a door. He had sketches on the table, crude, practical plans drawn with the concentration of a man who understood that if he didn't plan, the Burrow would simply grow in whatever direction it pleased. "We'll extend the second floor," Arthur explained, tapping the paper. "Bill and Charlie are getting too old to share. Percy can have the next room. Twins together. Ron and Harry." Molly looked at the tiny children on the floor, Ron in a playpen, Harry on a blanket, both with the same age-awkward movements, both loud in different ways. "Ron and Harry will share," Arthur finished. Molly sighed. "That'll be an adjustment." It was more than an adjustment. It was the beginning of a bond that would shape the whole war. At first, Ron did not like it. Ron had been the baby. Ron had been the last. Ron had been the one Molly picked up fastest, because he had been smallest. Now another baby existed in the house, another baby who cried, another baby who needed, another baby who received attention. The first time Harry cried, and Molly moved immediately. Ron's face crumpled with betrayal, and he let out a howl so powerful it seemed to shake the staircase. Molly picked Ron up with her free arm and held both babies at once, one on each hip. "Oh, Ron," she murmured, "you're still my baby. You're still loved. Harry just He lost his mum and dad. He needs extra love right now. Ron didn't understand the words, but he understood that Molly's voice was pleading. He understood that something had changed, and he didn't like it. Harry, meanwhile, blinked at Ron, and then, because Harry was 15 months old and had no sense of boundaries, grabbed a handful of Ron's red hair. Ron shrieked. Harry smiled, delighted by the sound. Molly pried tiny fingers free. Gentle, she instructed, the way she instructed every one of her sons. Gentle with family. Family. The word mattered even then, even before Ron could fully speak it. By the end of that first week, the house began to settle into a new pattern. Harry followed Ron around like a shadow. Ron tried to shake him off. Harry persisted. And somewhere in that push and pull, something formed. Something that wasn't blood, but was still real. The nursery became two cribs side by side. Molly sat between them in a rocking chair at night, exhausted, humming old songs under her breath. Harry would stare at the mobile with solemn focus until the tune eased him into sleep. Ron would fall asleep quickly, then wake at odd hours and demand Molly's attention, just to confirm she still belonged to him. Arthur would step into the doorway sometimes and watch the scene with a mix of awe and worry. They had chosen this. They had chosen to raise the most famous child alive. But in moments like this, two babies sleeping, Molly's hand moving gently from one crib to the other, the burrow humming softly under layers of fresh wards, Harry didn't look like a symbol. He looked like a child who had finally stopped crying. And that felt like the first victory. The first year passed in a blur of small, daily victories. Harry learned to walk with Bill holding his hands, guiding him across the kitchen floor as if teaching him to stand was a sacred responsibility. Bill had always been steady, even at 10, and he seemed to take the idea of new brother as a task he intended to do well. Charlie taught Harry about creatures the moment Harry could speak enough to ask questions. He showed him how to approach gnomes without startling them. He brought feathers and odd little bones from the garden and explained what they might have belonged to. Percy taught structure because Percy's love language was rules. He would read to Harry with careful patience, correct his pronunciation, and look secretly pleased when Harry listened. Fred and George taught mischief, and they did it like a science. The key, Fred told Harry solemnly when Harry was 5, is to look innocent. George demonstrated, wearing an angelic expression that would have convinced a stranger he had never done anything wrong in his entire life. Harry, who adored his brothers with fierce devotion, learned quickly. By 5, he could look Molly directly in the eye and say, with complete sincerity, "No, Mum," while standing behind his back with fingers crossed, like the twins had taught him. Molly learned his tells anyway, because mothers always did. When Harry was 6, a child at the village park, older, smug, repeating words he didn't fully understand, called him a charity case. Harry didn't know what it meant, but he knew the tone. He came home quiet. Arthur found him later, sitting on the back step, staring at the garden. "What's wrong, son?" Arthur asked gently. Harry hesitated. "Why do people say things like that?" he asked. Like I'm a thing. Like I'm an extra." Arthur sat beside him. He didn't rush to fill the silence. Arthur was a man who believed in listening. Finally, he said, "Some people think kindness makes them look small, so they insult it. They call it weakness. They call it charity. But what we did, what your mum and I did, that wasn't pity." Harry looked at him, eyes too green, too serious. "We took you because you needed a family," Arthur said, "and because Lily, your birth mum, was our friend. She fought for what was right. She loved you so much. She died making sure you lived. We couldn't let her son grow up believing he was unwanted. Harry's throat tightened around a feeling he didn't have words for yet. Do I have to call them my real parents? He asked quietly. Because you and Mum are my real parents. Arthur's eyes softened. He pulled Harry into his side, firm and warm. You don't have to choose, Arthur said. Lily and James gave you life. Your mum and I are raising you. Both are true. Both matter, and you're ours, no matter what anyone says. That was the sort of sentence that rooted itself into a child's bones. Not as an argument, as a truth. Molly and Arthur told Harry the rest of the story gradually, in pieces shaped for his age. They didn't drop a tragedy onto him all at once and expect him to carry it. They didn't pretend nothing had happened. They simply let him grow into the knowledge instead of crushing him with it. At 5, Harry learned his birth parents had died protecting him from a terrible wizard. At 6, he learned the scar on his forehead came from that night. At 7, before his first year at primary school, they sat him down properly, with Ron jammed against Molly's side because Ron insisted on being included in anything that involved Harry. There's more, Molly said softly. Arthur took a breath. The wizard who killed your parents was named Voldemort, he said. He tried to kill you, too. He failed. The war ended that night. People decided you were a symbol of hope. They call you the boy who lived. Harry stared at them, absorbing the words like stones being placed carefully in his hands. So people know me, he said slowly, in the magical world. Yes, Molly replied. And I'm famous. Yes, Arthur said, and his voice held regret, as if fame was a thing he wished he could lift off Harry's shoulders and throw into the sea. Harry's face tightened. I don't want that. Molly's hand cupped the back of his head. You don't have to want it, she said. You just have to live with it. And we'll help you. Ron piped up immediately, offended on Harry's behalf. And if anyone's mean, I'll hex them. You will not, Molly said automatically. Ron scowled. But we use words, Molly said firmly. And we use sense. And we use each other. Harry glanced at Ron. Ron's face was stubborn, loyal, already ready to fight for him like it was the simplest thing in the world. Harry felt something in his chest loosen. It didn't erase the fear, but it made it bearable. The years before Hogwarts came with their own problems, their own lessons. There was money, for one. Harry did not grow up in luxury. He grew up in hand-me-downs and patched jumpers, and meals stretched to feed one more hungry boy. He learned early that Molly's cooking was not infinite, that Arthur's paycheck didn't magically expand just because love did. He also learned, slowly, painfully, that he had a vault full of gold that he couldn't access, and that this fact sat in the middle of the family like a stone no one wanted to name out loud. It showed itself in small ways, in the way Molly hesitated over a list of school supplies, in the way Arthur counted coins twice, in the way Ron sometimes stared at other children's new things too long, as if resentment might be hiding behind his eyes even when he didn't want it there. Harry tried to fix it once, when he was older. He asked Molly if he could buy Ron a new wand when they were preparing for Hogwarts, because Charlie's old wand didn't fit Ron properly, and Harry could see the frustration building in him like smoke. Molly's answer was gentle but unmovable. No, she said, not because you don't love him, but because we won't take your inheritance. It's yours. Your parents left it for your future. And Ron needs to learn to live with what we can give him, not with what you can pay for. Harry hated that answer, not because it wasn't logical, because it was unfair. And unfairness was a thing Harry had never learned to accept quietly. But that was later. For now, the Burrow was home. The only home Harry truly remembered. And when Hogwarts finally approached, when letters arrived and lists of supplies and the world began to reach for Harry again, Harry didn't fear leaving because he thought he had nowhere to return to. He feared leaving because he finally had something worth losing. That summer, before Hogwarts, the house was full again. Bill came home, taller and more confident, Hogwarts already shaping him. Charlie came too, laughing and loud, smelling faintly of outdoors and adventure. Percy brought his new school pride like armor, already talking about standards and achievement, as if he was practicing for a future career in being unbearable. Fred and George turned every day into a performance. And Ron and Harry, still close, still tangled together in the way only boys raised like brothers could be, counted down the days until they would board the train. They told themselves it would be simple. They told themselves they'd be together. They told themselves houses couldn't separate them. They told themselves 1,000 hopeful things, the way children did when they wanted something badly enough to believe it. But beneath that excitement was a tension they didn't fully name yet. Because Hogwarts wasn't just a school, it was the place where the wizarding world would finally meet Harry Potter, up close. Not the baby, not the rumor, not the symbol, the boy. And the wizarding world had a habit of taking boys and turning them into stories that didn't belong to them. The summer before Hogwarts should have felt like a victory lap. In a different life, it might have been. 11 years old, letter in hand. A clean line from childhood to the beginning of something bigger. A straight path. A bright one. But nothing about Harry's life was straight, and nothing about him was cleanly separated from the world that insisted on claiming him. At the Burrow, the weeks before term began, arrived under the usual layers of family chaos. Molly's lists, Arthur's calculations, Fred and George's constant attempts to turn every responsibility into a prank. Percy's loud insistence that everyone should be taking this seriously. And Ron and Harry bouncing between excitement and fear, so quickly neither of them could settle in one feeling for more than a minute. Harry slept in the same room as Ron. He always had. 2 beds, close together, the way Molly had arranged them when they were old enough not to need cribs. The room was small, but it held everything that mattered. A window that looked out over crooked fields, the smell of old books and slightly burnt toast drifting up from the kitchen, and the sense that no matter how strange the outside world became, this place would still be waiting for him. He kept thinking about Hogwarts, as if it were a doorway he'd been leaning towards his whole life. Ron thought about it like a prize. Not because Ron was greedy, not because he didn't love his family, but because Ron had grown up watching his older brothers leave, return, leave again, each one coming back with stories, with confidence, with that invisible something Hogwarts gave you. Ron had been the baby for years. Then suddenly, not even the baby. Then Harry had arrived, and Ron had learned that love could stretch, but attention didn't always feel like it did. Hogwarts, in Ron's mind, meant finally becoming someone who wasn't just the youngest. It meant finally having a space that belonged to him. Harry understood that, even if Ron never said it out loud. The letters arrived on the same day. 2 thick envelopes, sealed in green wax, addressed in identical ink. Mr. H. Potter, The Burrow, Ottery St. Catchpole. Mr. R. Weasley, The Burrow, Ottery St. Catchpole. Molly held them like they were fragile. Arthur's eyes went bright and proud in a way that always made Harry's chest ache with gratitude. Percy immediately began reciting advice, as if he'd been asked. "You'll want to start reading ahead," Percy announced. "First-year work isn't hard if you apply yourself properly. But if you waste time..." Fred and George leaned over from behind him. "If you waste time," one repeated solemnly. "You become Percy," the other finished. And both of them dissolved into laughter as Percy went scarlet. Molly swatted at them without real force. Enough, she said. Let them open their letters. Harry's fingers shook slightly as he broke the seal. Not because he was scared of school. He wasn't. He'd been waiting for this. But the parchment felt like proof. Proof that the world was going to see him. Proof that things were about to change. Ron read his list aloud, eyes widening at the length of it. And then he and Harry stared at each other with matching expressions of excitement collapsing into immediate concern. That's a lot, Ron said finally. It's fine, Harry said automatically. Because it's fine was what you said in the Burrow when something was very much not fine, but you were going to do it anyway. Arthur sat down later that evening with a paper and a quill and the careful focus of a man preparing for battle. Molly stood behind him, arms crossed, watching him add and subtract. Bill was home for the summer and leaned on the doorway with a look that said he'd like to help, but didn't want to make it worse by being too obvious about it. Charlie hovered near the table too, restless and guilty in the way older brothers got when they remembered what it felt like to be 11 and desperate for new things. Percy watched the numbers, like he might be able to intimidate them into being smaller. Fred and George wandered in and out, pretending not to care while caring deeply. Ron and Harry sat on the stairs together, listening. Arthur exhaled slowly. We can do it, he said. Second hand where we can. New where we must. Molly's jaw tightened. Wands, she said immediately. No hand-me-down wands unless there's no choice. Arthur's eyes flicked toward Ron and Harry, softening. 2 boys. Same year, he murmured. Merlin, help us. Ron looked down at his knees. Harry felt a familiar twist in his stomach, part love, part guilt, part helplessness, because Harry knew something Ron didn't fully say. Harry knew there was gold sitting in a vault with his name on it. Harry also knew he wasn't allowed to touch it freely. Not yet. The ministry controlled access until he came of age. Molly and Arthur had legal guardianship, but they'd refused to treat Harry's inheritance like family income. It was Harry's future. It belonged to Lily and James. It was not a pot of money to patch holes in the Burrow's roof. Harry had tried to argue once, quietly, when he was 10, and had overheard Molly debating whether she could put off replacing a cracked cauldron another year. Arthur had crouched in front of him and said very gently, "We don't take from you what your parents left you." Harry had snapped back, "But you took me." Arthur had looked pained. "We took you because you're our son," he'd replied. "Not because of what you might have one day. That's exactly why we can't start behaving like your gold is ours. I won't let anyone say we did." Harry had hated that logic, even while understanding it. Now, with Hogwarts looming, that old frustration returned sharper. 2 sets of supplies, 2 sets of robes, 2 sets of books, 2 wands, 2 boys who loved each other. 2 boys who were about to learn that loving someone didn't erase inequality. Molly announced they'd be going to Diagon Alley early in the morning, hoping to avoid crowds. "We'll go before lunch," she said briskly. "Get everything done quickly. No lingering. No wandering off." Fred and George immediately tried to volunteer. "We can help carry. We can help choose. You can help by staying here," Molly snapped, and their faces fell in exaggerated despair. Bill offered instead. "I'll come," he said, steady and calm. "To help." Molly hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Bill and Percy, you come. Charlie stays with the twins. Arthur grimaced. "Work." Molly's expression softened. "I know." Arthur kissed her cheek, and then kissed the tops of Ron and Harry's heads in quick succession. "Be good," he told them. Then, quieter, to Harry alone. "And remember, whatever happens out there, You come back here. Harry nodded, throat tight. I know, he whispered. Diagon Alley smelled like the wizarding world. That was the only way Harry could think to describe it. Even after growing up with magic, even after years of watching older brothers come home with sweets and parchment and stories, Diagon Alley still felt like stepping into the center of something that never stopped moving. Shops leaned close together like they were gossiping. Signs swung overhead. Owls hooted in cages outside the magical menagerie. Robes swished past. Laughter burst and vanished. There was an energy to it that made Ron look like he might explode from excitement. Harry wanted to feel only that excitement. He tried. But the moment they stepped through the leaky cauldron and into the alley, Harry felt eyes on him. At first, it was just a flicker, someone pausing mid-step, someone's head turning, a whisper that didn't bother to hide itself. Then it became a wave. That's him. That's Harry Potter. Is that, look at his scar. And those are the Weasleys. Raised by them, can you imagine? Blood traitors. Harry's shoulders tightened. Ron's hand shot out, grabbing Harry's wrist with automatic possessiveness. Don't look at them, Ron muttered, jaw clenched. Just keep walking. Molly's posture changed, too. She straightened, chin lifting, as if she could physically block the world's judgment from touching her sons. Bill walked slightly behind them, scanning the crowd like a quiet guard. Percy looked furious in a way that made his ears go red. Keep close, Molly said, voice controlled. Ron, Harry, right beside me. They reached Gringotts as quickly as possible. Harry had been to the bank once before, briefly escorted, rushed through. This time, stepping into the marble hall with its echoing space and tall, severe goblins, he felt the weight of it more sharply. Money, Harry had learned, was its own kind of magic in the wizarding world. It opened doors, it bought influence, it softened consequences. And Harry had it, more than the Weasleys would ever have, without having done a single thing to earn it. A goblin at the desk glanced at Molly, at Percy's stiff shoulders, at Ron's cheap robes, and then looked at Harry. His eyes narrowed slightly. Mr. Harry Potter, he said, voice clipped and certain. Harry flinched at the sound of his name spoken like that, like a title. We need to withdraw for school supplies, Molly said firmly. Of course, the goblin replied. Then his gaze sharpened again. Protocol requires the Potter Vault to be accessed under goblin supervision. Molly's mouth tightened. We're not here for sightseeing. The goblin's expression didn't change. It is not sightseeing, Madam Weasley. It is procedure. Ron shifted closer to Harry, as if his body could shield him from the bank's judgment. Bill leaned in slightly. Let's just do it, he murmured to Molly. Get it over with. Molly exhaled sharply, then nodded once. Fine. The goblin led them through the bank and down, deeper, colder, faster. The cart rattled along rails, and Harry gripped the side harder than he needed to, because the motion felt like being dragged toward a truth he didn't want to see. Ron's face was pale. Percy looked tense, like he was about to complain about safety regulations. Bill stayed calm, but Harry noticed the way Bill watched the goblin's wand hand. Vault 687. The door swung open, and suddenly Harry understood why the wizarding world talked about the Potters the way it did. Gold. Not just a stack, not just a pile, but a room full of it. Mounds of galleons like small suns, towers of sickles, glittering canuts spilling into corners, and objects tucked into shelves that looked old enough to have stories of their own. Harry stared. Ron stared harder. Percy's mouth dropped open. Bill's eyebrows rose. Then he looked away quickly, like staring too long felt rude. The goblin stepped aside. Your inheritance, Mr. Potter, he said. Left by your parents. Harry's stomach turned, because it wasn't just money. It was proof of absence. It was everything Lily and James had built, and everything they would never get to spend on their son. His eyes caught on something perched carefully on a smaller shelf near the back, an envelope, worn at the edges, addressed to him in neat handwriting. Lily's handwriting. Molly had shown him letters once, carefully. Old notes Lily had sent to a friend during the war. Harry recognized the shape of her words even without reading them. He didn't move toward it. He couldn't. "This is all yours," the goblin said again, impatient now. Harry swallowed. "I don't want it," he said, voice small. Ron's head snapped toward him. Percy looked scandalized. Bill looked sad. The goblin's expression remained unimpressed. "Want is irrelevant. It is yours." Harry forced himself to breathe. "My parents died," he said, and the words felt rough in his mouth. "I got this because they died." Ron's face flushed red, like anger and shame had collided. Bill's eyes softened. Molly stepped forward then, not touching the gold, but touching Harry, her hand firm on his shoulder. "You don't have to like it," she said quietly. "You don't have to feel grateful. But it's not your fault." Harry looked at the piles again and felt like he was drowning. "How much do we need?" Molly asked, voice clipped, businesslike now because she knew that lingering here would only make this worse. They withdrew a small pouch, enough for school supplies, and then some. Harry hated how small the pouch looked compared to what remained. He hated that the gold didn't feel like security. It felt like a wall between him and his family. When the vault door closed again, Ron stayed silent the entire ride back up. So did Harry, in the marble hall, as they stepped away from Gringotts. Ron finally let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest the whole time. "That's," Ron began. Harry looked at him, bracing. Ron's voice came out strained. "That's a lot of gold." Harry nodded. "Yeah." Ron swallowed. His ears were bright red. "We live in a house held together by charms and hope," he said, trying to sound like he was joking, but failing. "And you've got that." Harry's throat tightened. "I didn't ask for it." "I know," Ron said quickly. "I know you didn't. I'm not." He cut himself off, struggling. "I'm not mad. It's just weird." Harry wanted to fix it immediately. That was his instinct. Fix the discomfort. Fix the imbalance. Fix the thing that made Ron's voice sound wrong. "So I can use it," Harry blurted. "I can buy—" Molly's head snapped around, sharp as a whip. "No," she said, and the single word landed like a door closing. Harry's face burned. "I wasn't. You were," Molly said, not unkindly, but firm. "And I know it's coming from love, but we are not doing this in the street. Not here." Bill placed a hand lightly on Harry's shoulder. "Later," he murmured. "Just later." They moved on to the shops, but the damage was already there, quiet and invisible. It didn't ruin the day, not completely. They bought robes, second-hand where possible, with Molly inspecting seams like a general preparing troops. They bought books, heavy and expensive. They bought cauldrons and scales and vials. Harry tried to match Ron whenever he could. When Ron picked a worn copy, Harry picked the worn copy too. When Ron accepted a robe with faded lining, Harry accepted the same. Not because Harry wanted less, because Harry wanted them to be equal. But equality couldn't be bought through imitation. It just made the difference more obvious. Ollivander's was the worst of it. Not because the shop was unpleasant. The shop felt like history, like dust holding its breath. But because the wand chose the wizard. And that meant Ron and Harry couldn't match their way through this part. Ron stepped forward first, shoulders squared, determination written all over him. Ollivander inspected him, took measurements, muttered. Ron held Charlie's old wand in his hand, and Harry could see the way Ron's grip tightened around it, like he was trying to force it to belong to him through sheer will. Ollivander clicked his tongue. "Not ideal," he murmured. Ron's face tightened. "It's fine," Ron said quickly. Ollivander didn't respond. He simply tested sparks, weak ones, a wobble of magic that didn't settle. Ron's jaw clenched. Then Harry stepped forward. Ollivander's pale eyes widened slightly. "Ah," he said softly. "Yes, of course. Mr. Potter." The name again, the weight again. The wand that chose Harry did so with frightening certainty. Holly, 11 inches. Phoenix feather. It responded, like it had been waiting. When Harry held it, warmth ran up his arm, clean and alive. The air seemed to sharpen around him, as if magic itself had turned its head to look. Ollivander's voice dropped. "Curious," he murmured. "Very curious." Harry swallowed. "What's curious?" Ollivander's eyes flicked toward Harry's scar. "The wand chooses," he said, not answering directly. "And yours has chosen you for a reason." Ron stood beside Harry, holding his own wand like it was suddenly too heavy. Harry tried not to look at Ron's face. He failed. Ron wasn't angry. Not yet. He just looked small. And that hurt more than anger would have. Outside the shop, Molly tried to brighten the moment. "Right," she said briskly. "Ice cream, then home." Ron muttered, "Sure." Harry stared at his wand, then at Ron's, and felt something twist inside him. He couldn't stop seeing the pattern. Harry's wand fit perfectly. Ron's didn't. Harry had gold he couldn't freely touch, but that still existed like a shadow over everything. Ron had none. Harry was famous. Ron wasn't. Harry was loved fully at home, but the wider world insisted on treating him differently. And Ron, even at 11, could feel what that difference meant. Back at the Burrow that night, Harry waited until Ron fell asleep and then slipped downstairs. Molly was in the kitchen, scrubbing a pot that didn't need scrubbing. Her eyes looked tired. Harry lingered in the doorway. Molly didn't turn around. "Come in, love." Harry stepped closer. Can I ask something?" Molly finally faced him. "Yes." Harry's voice came out small. "Can I buy Ron a new wand?" Molly's expression softened and tightened at the same time, like she was proud and hurt all at once. "Oh, Harry, it's not fair," Harry rushed. "It's not fair that mine fits and his doesn't. It's not fair I have gold and—" "It isn't fair," Molly agreed quietly. "But we don't fix everything by spending your inheritance." "But why not?" Harry demanded, frustration cracking through. "You said family shares. You said family takes care of each other." "We do," Molly said. "We share what we have. We take care of each other with what belongs to all of us. But that gold," she shook her head, "that gold is a ghost, Harry. It's Lily and James's life turned into coins. It's meant for your future, your education, your home, your children, one day. If we start leaning on it now, people will say we took you for it. They will say we used you." "And worse." "Worse?" Harry whispered. Molly's eyes were fierce. "Worse is you growing up thinking your worth in this family is what you can pay for. You are not our son because you're Harry Potter. You are not our son because of that vault. You are our son because we love you. Ron needs to know that too. Ron needs to know he isn't owed your money to be your brother. And you need to know you aren't required to buy your place here." Harry's eyes burned. It builds resentment, he muttered, thinking of Ron's face in Ollivander's. Molly didn't deny it. It might, she said. And if it does, we'll deal with it the way we deal with everything else. Together, with honesty, with time. But not by turning you into the solution to a problem you didn't create. Harry wanted to argue more. He wanted to force the world into being balanced, but he didn't. Because Molly's voice wasn't cruel. It was protective. Protective of Ron, yes. But also protective of Harry. He nodded stiffly. Molly pulled him into a hug before he could pull away. "You're a good boy," she whispered, "and you're going to be a good man. But you don't have to carry this alone." Harry's throat tightened. "I don't want Ron to hate me." Molly's arms tightened. "He won't," she said. And then, honest as always, "He might be angry sometimes. He might be jealous sometimes. But he loves you. That's real. And we'll remind him of it when he forgets." Harry nodded into her shoulder, breathing in the scent of home, soap, flour, warm air. Upstairs, Ron slept, unaware of the conversation, unaware of the quiet war building inside him between love and insecurity. 3 days later, the first real fight happened anyway. It started with magic practice, because of course it did. Ron stood in the garden with Charlie's wand, face screwed up in concentration. "Wingardium Leviosa," he said through clenched teeth. Nothing. He tried again. Nothing. Harry stood beside him, holly wand light in his hand. When he said the words, the stone lifted smoothly, spinning gently in the air like it belonged there. Ron stared at it. Harry lowered it quickly. "Sorry, I wasn't. Everything's easy for you," Ron snapped, voice sharp with a pain he didn't know how to soften. "Perfect wand, perfect magic. Everyone's staring at you like you're something special." Harry's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for any of it." Ron's laugh was short and bitter. "No, you just get it." Harry's frustration flared. "You think I want people whispering? You think I like being stared at? I'd trade it for what?" Ron shot back. "To be normal? You mean to be poor?" Harry's face burned. "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is," Ron said, voice rising. "You've got more gold than I'll ever see. Even my wand isn't mine. It's Charlie's. And you walk around like none of it matters, because you want to pretend we're the same." "We are the same," Harry said desperately. "We're brothers." Ron's eyes flashed. Then the words came out. Too harsh, too cutting. The kind of words that only come out when someone is terrified their feelings are true. "We're not really brothers," Ron said. "Not really. You're Harry Potter, and I'm just Ron Weasley." For a second, the world went quiet for Harry. Not outside. Inside, like something had been struck. Ron stormed away. Harry stood in the garden, staring at the stone still sitting on the grass where it had dropped, and felt the old fear creep in. The fear that maybe the world was right. Maybe he didn't truly belong anywhere. Maybe love could stretch, but not forever. Molly found him later, still standing there like his feet had rooted into the earth. Ron had told her. Ron always told her after he said something cruel. That was one of Ron's quiet, stubborn virtues. He might lash out, but he didn't hide it. Molly stepped close until Harry looked up. "Harry James Potter," she said, voice low and fierce. "You look at me." Harry did. "You are my son," she said. "You hear me? Not my charity project. Not my burden. My son." Harry's eyes stung. "He's right," he whispered. "I'm different. I'm famous. I'm... And Bill is brilliant," Molly cut in sharply. And Charlie is brave. And Percy is stubborn. And Fred and George are trouble. And Ron is loyal enough to break his own heart trying to keep everyone together. Every one of my sons is different. Differences don't cancel family. Harry's voice cracked. Then why does it feel like they do? Molly's expression softened just a fraction. Because you're 11, she said. And because love doesn't stop feelings from being complicated. Ron doesn't hate you. Ron is scared. Scared he'll never be enough next to you. And you're scared you'll be thrown out the moment you cause trouble. You both need time to grow out of those fears. Harry swallowed. What if he never does? Molly cupped his cheek, thumb wiping away a tear Harry didn't realize had fallen. Then we keep loving him until he does, she said simply. That's what parents do. 2 days later, Ron shuffled into their room and stood awkwardly at the foot of Harry's bed. Harry sat up, heart pounding. Ron's ears were red. I'm sorry, Ron muttered. I didn't mean it. I mean, I did mean it, but I didn't mean. He groaned in frustration. I'm sorry. Harry swallowed. I'm sorry too, he said quietly. I don't know how to fix it. Ron's face twisted, honest and miserable. I don't want you to leave, he admitted. I don't want you to remember you're Harry Potter and decide you don't need us. Harry stared at him, stunned. Then he said the truest thing he knew. I don't want to leave, he whispered. I want you. I want Mum and Dad. I want the Burrow. I want us. Ron's shoulders sagged with relief so intense it looked like exhaustion. They didn't solve the problem. The gold still existed. The fame still existed. The imbalance still existed. But they remembered something more important. They loved each other. And love, even when it didn't erase inequality, could still be the reason you chose each other again. September 1st came anyway. King's Cross was crowded and strange, full of muggles rushing past without noticing the invisible doorway to a different world. Molly herded her children with the same fierce focus she used when she was managing dinner for 9 people. Percy lectured. The twins teased. Bill and Charlie came to see them off, both of them acting casual in the way older brothers did when they were secretly emotional. Molly hugged Ron and Harry last, pulling them in so tight Harry could barely breathe. Look after each other, she said. Stick together. And remember, no matter what happens at Hogwarts, you come home to us. Ron nodded fiercely. We will. Harry nodded too, throat too tight to speak. They ran through the barrier together, side by side, trunks rattling, hearts pounding. And for the first time in their lives, they were leaving the Burrow without an army of brothers around them. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like stepping into weather. On the train, they found an empty compartment, shoved their trunks into the corners, and sat facing each other with matching expressions of disbelief. We're really doing it, Ron whispered. Harry let out a breath. Yeah. They met Hermione Granger, who bulldozed into their compartment with a book in her hands and certainty in her eyes. They met Neville Longbottom, sweaty and worried and desperate for his lost toad. They met Draco Malfoy, who smiled at Harry like he believed Harry belonged with him by default. You'll want to be careful who you're friends with, Draco drawled, eyes flicking toward Ron's robes with open contempt. Some people are better left behind. Harry's stomach tightened. Ron's grip on Harry's sleeve tightened too, wordless and pleading. Harry looked Draco straight in the face. I'm not leaving anyone behind, Harry said coldly, especially not my brother. Draco's smile faltered. Brother, he repeated, sneer sharpening. Weasley? Ron's ears went red, but he didn't let go of Harry. Harry's voice didn't shake. Yeah, he said. Weasley. Draco's eyes flashed with anger. You'll regret that. Maybe, Harry said. But I won't regret choosing the right people. Draco left in a huff. Hermione stared at them like they'd just committed a crime. You do realize he's a Malfoy, she said, scandalized. That family is influential. Ron snorted. Good. Harry leaned back against the seat, heart pounding, and realized something quietly important. In this life, he didn't choose Ron at Hogwarts. He'd chosen Ron his whole childhood, and he was going to keep choosing him, even when it was hard. The castle appeared over the lake like a promise carved in stone, lit from inside, vast and impossible. First years crossed the water in boats, the black surface reflecting the lights like stars fallen into the world. Harry stared at Hogwarts and felt wonder hit him so hard it almost hurt. This was where everything began. Not as the boy who lived, not as the Potter heir. As Harry, loved, claimed, stubbornly held by a family that had already decided he belonged. And as he stepped onto the shore beside Ron, cold night air on his face, and the castle towering above, he didn't feel like an orphan walking into a world that might accept him. He felt like a Weasley walking into a world that would have to get used to the fact that he wasn't alone. As for Monkshood and Wolfsbane, Snape continued, still writing without looking at anyone, they are the same plant. It is also known as aconite. He paused, quill hovering, then turned with slow precision, as if he wanted the entire room to feel the weight of his attention. Well, he said softly, why isn't this being copied down? Quill scratched parchment immediately. Harry's fingers moved too, but his face burned so hot he could barely see the words. It wasn't only the questions, it was the deliberate choice Snape was making. To single him out, to embarrass him in front of everyone, to remind the class that Harry Potter's name was a target whether he wanted it or not. Hermione shot him a sympathetic look that didn't quite land, because Hermione's sympathy always came with an edge of, you could have prevented this by reading. Ron's jaw was clenched so hard Harry thought it might. Crack. Snape swept down the aisle between benches, robes whispering against the stone, stopping at Neville's cauldron with a look of disgust. Weasley, Snape said abruptly, eyes flicking toward Ron. Explain to me why Longbottom's cauldron is simmering too high. Ron blinked. What? Surely, Snape said, voice silk over steel. Someone raised in a wizarding home has at least seen a potion brewed. Ron's ears went red. We don't brew not like this. He snapped before he could stop himself. Snape's lip curled. Of course not. Your family has never been known for excellence. Harry felt that like a slap. Not at Ron. At all of them. He opened his mouth. Snape's eyes snapped to him instantly, as if he'd been waiting for it. Do not, Snape said quietly, interfere, Potter. Harry closed his mouth. His hands shook around his quill. The lesson went downhill from there. Neville's cauldron boiled over, and the moment it happened, Snape moved like a predator finding an excuse. Idiot boy, Snape hissed. I told you to remove from heat before adding the quills. Neville's face went white. The potion spat. Steam rose. Neville yelped as hot liquid splashed his arms, and within seconds angry boils erupted across his skin. Hermione was already moving, grabbing Neville, trying to guide him away. Ron looked like he wanted to hex Snape on the spot. Harry's instinct surged. Protect, help, fix. Snape's head snapped up again, and for a moment Harry saw something almost satisfied in his eyes, like he'd been waiting for chaos. Potter, Snape said coldly, since you're so eager to be noticed, perhaps you would like to explain why you didn't stop Longbottom from making this mistake. Harry stared at him, stunned. I didn't. 2 points from Gryffindor, Snape said, voice flat. For your failure to assist a classmate, "That's not fair," Ron burst out. Snape turned slowly to Ron, eyes narrowing. "One more point from Gryffindor," he said, "for talking back. Detention if you speak again." Ron looked like he might explode. Harry grabbed his sleeve under the table, a desperate warning. Not because Ron wasn't right, because Snape wanted them to react. He wanted Ron to give him a reason. Ron's chest rose and fell sharply. He shut his mouth by sheer force. Harry copied down the rest of the board, with his face still burning and a cold, sinking realization in his stomach. Snape hated him. Not in a vague, teacher dislikes student way, in a personal way, and Harry had no idea why. The next few weeks were a mix of wonder and pressure. Transfiguration and charms felt like proof that Harry could be good at Hogwarts without being famous. He earned praise the normal way, by doing the work. Hermione was brilliant and annoying about it. Ron was capable and stubborn, and got furious when something didn't work. Neville tried so hard Harry's chest ached for him. Defense against the dark arts was unfortunately taught by Professor Quirrell, who seemed to shake if anyone looked at him too directly. Quirrell smelled faintly of garlic and nerves. He spoke in a stutter that made it difficult to focus on the content of his lessons, which mostly involved describing dark creatures rather than actually teaching defense. Herbology with Professor Sprout was muddy and alive, full of plants that snapped and squealed when you touched the wrong part of them. Harry loved it more than he expected. It was practical, real, like the garden at home, only louder. And then there was the constant attention. It never fully stopped. Whispers in corridors, people staring too long, students asking questions that weren't questions at all, just ways to get close to the scar and the story. Some wanted to touch his shoulder, like bravery might rub off. Some wanted to challenge him, to prove they weren't impressed. Some looked at him like he was a weapon that might go off in their direction. Harry learned quickly that being Harry Weasley didn't erase Harry Potter. It just meant he had something to cling to when the outside world tried to pull him apart. Ron was his anchor. Ron walked beside him in corridors. Ron sat beside him in lessons. Ron bristled at anyone who spoke about Harry like he wasn't in the room. Hermione, once she decided Harry and Ron were her friends, attached herself with the determination of someone who had finally found a place to belong. She argued with them constantly. She also showed up constantly. And in that first autumn at Hogwarts, constancy mattered. Flying lessons started in September. The moment Madame Hooch handed them brooms and told them to mount up, Harry felt a familiar calm settle over him. He'd been flying since he was 6. Charlie had taught him, stern and proud, refusing to let Harry get away with bad habits. Bill had taught him to think strategically, how to anticipate movement, how to stay level when adrenaline tried to jerk you into mistakes. Even Fred and George had contributed, mostly by yelling unhelpful but enthusiastic advice. When Harry's broom rose smoothly into his hand, he almost smiled. Madame Hooch noticed immediately. "Good," she said, surprised. "Potter, isn't it?" Harry nodded. Her gaze sharpened, impressed despite herself. "We'll see what you can do," she said. The lesson was going tolerably until Neville's broom took off like it had decided it was leaving this planet. Neville rose high, face panicked, clutching the broom as if letting go would shatter him. "Come back down," Madame Hooch yelled. Neville couldn't. He slipped. He fell. The thud of his landing made Harry's stomach lurch, and Neville's cry of pain went through the whole group like a warning. Madame Hooch hustled Neville toward the castle, face tight with concern. "None of you fly while I'm gone," she snapped. "That is an order." The moment she left, Draco Malfoy sauntered forward with that particular smugness that came from always believing the world would bend around him. He picked up Neville's remembrall from the grass and held it up. Look what Longbottom dropped, Draco called. How embarrassing. Give it back, Ron snapped. Draco's eyes flicked to Harry, calculating. Come get it, Potter, he said lightly. And then, before anyone could stop him, he kicked off the ground and rose into the air. Harry didn't move at first. He knew the rule. He knew Madame Hooch would punish him. He knew Molly would murder him if she heard he'd flown unsupervised after his first week. But the Remembrall glittered in Draco's hand. Neville lay inside with a broken wrist. Ron looked furious. Hermione looked terrified. And Harry felt something sharp rise inside him, not a need to show off, not a desire for glory, a need to stop Draco from taking something that didn't belong to him. Harry mounted his broom. Harry, no, Hermione hissed. Ron's eyes widened. Harry. Harry kicked off and shot upward, like he'd been built for it. The air rushed cold against his face. The ground dropped away. Draco looked startled for a fraction of a second. Then his expression turned competitive. He swerved. Harry followed. They darted over the grounds, brooms cutting through the sky. Draco was fast, but he flew like someone trying to look good. Harry flew like someone trying to win. When Draco threw the Remembrall high, expecting Harry to miss it, Harry leaned into the dive without thinking. Charlie had taught him that move when he was little. Don't hesitate. Commit fully. Trust your hands. Harry shot downward, arms stretching, wind roaring in his ears, and caught the Remembrall inches from the ground. He landed hard, but controlled, knees bending, broom skimming grass. He lifted the Remembrall. For a second, the other students stared at him like he'd performed some kind of ritual. Then, Hermione's voice cut through, shocked and furious. Are you out of your mind? Ron's face was bright with awe. That was incredible. Harry opened his mouth to answer. Potter. The voice was sharp, Scottish, dangerous. Harry turned. Professor McGonagall stood there, eyes like steel. Harry's stomach dropped straight through the floor. He was sure she was going to expel him. He was sure he'd ruined everything. McGonagall didn't shout. That was worse. Come with me, she said. Harry followed her into the castle, feeling like he was walking to his execution. Ron looked like he might throw himself after Harry. Hermione looked like she might cry. McGonagall marched him through corridors and up staircases until they stopped outside a classroom door. She knocked once, opened it, and said, Wood. A tall, broad-shouldered boy turned, Quidditch robes half on, expression intense. Yes, Professor. McGonagall jerked her head toward Harry. I found you a seeker. Harry blinked. A what? Wood's eyes lit up in a way that was frankly alarming. A seeker? McGonagall's gaze pinned Harry. What you did out there was reckless, she said, and against instructions. Harry's heart sank. Yes, Professor. And also, she continued, the best natural flying I've seen in years. Harry stared, stunned. Wood stepped forward, practically vibrating. Can he turn? McGonagall's mouth twitched as if she was fighting an expression. Show him, she ordered. 5 minutes later, Harry was flying around the empty practice area while Wood barked instructions at him, like his life depended on it. Harry followed instinctively, adjusting, cutting sharp angles, diving, pulling up. The broom felt like an extension of his body. The Remembrall catch had been adrenaline. This was something deeper. Familiarity. Wood stopped him, eyes bright. You're a natural, he declared. McGonagall nodded once, satisfied. Then it's decided. Harry landed, breathless. Decided what? You're on the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Wood said, like he was announcing Harry had been chosen by destiny. Youngest in a century. Harry stared at them. But first years can't. McGonagall's eyes gleamed. "The rules exist," she said, "and sometimes they bend when it's in the best interest of the house." Harry should have felt triumphant. He should have felt thrilled. He did feel thrilled until the next potions lesson. Because the moment Snape learned Harry had been put on the team, he reacted exactly the way Harry should have expected. Snape waited until everyone left, then said softly, "Potter." Harry paused, heart sinking. Snape's eyes were cold and pleased all at once. "Quidditch," Snape murmured. "Special treatment, rule breaking rewarded." "I didn't ask for it," Harry said quickly. Snape leaned closer, voice low. "No," he said. "You simply receive it. Because you're famous." Harry's throat tightened. "Professor, I will not overlook anything," Snape said. "Not a single toe out of line. And if you think your new position makes you untouchable," he smiled, and it wasn't kind, "you will learn otherwise." Harry left the dungeon shaking with anger. He wasn't used to adults hating him. He was used to being loved, scolded fairly, corrected, and forgiven. Even when Molly was furious, it came from care. Even when Arthur was disappointed, it came from hope. Snape's hatred felt like something else, like punishment for existing. Quidditch became Harry's refuge. On the pitch, he wasn't a symbol. He wasn't a rumor. He wasn't a scar. He was fast. He was focused. He was useful. Wood drilled him relentlessly. Angelina Johnson and Alicia Spinnet threw bludgers at him with startling enthusiasm. Fred and George, as beaters, took immediate delight in protecting Harry with a fierceness that was half sport and half older brother instinct. "We heard you were adopted," Fred said cheerfully during one practice. "But don't worry," George nodded seriously. "We've decided you're officially ours anyway." Harry laughed, and the sound felt like breathing again. The first match, Gryffindor versus Slytherin, arrived in November. The stands were packed. Students wore house colors. The energy was so loud it made Harry's head buzz. He spotted familiar faces. Percy sitting tall near the front, looking like he might explode with pride. The twins in the stands too, waving like lunatics. Ron in the front row, screaming Harry's name with a devotion that made Harry's throat tighten. Harry mounted his broom, heart hammering. Then his broom jerked beneath him. Not the normal twitch of a broom adjusting. A violent lurch. Harry gripped tighter. The broom bucked again. Harry's stomach dropped. His broom tried to throw him off in front of everyone. At first, Harry thought it was panic, his own nerves, a loose strap. Then the broom twisted sharply, like something had grabbed it and yanked. Harry's hands slipped an inch. Cold fear washed through him. This wasn't normal. This wasn't an accident. He clung desperately, knuckles white, broom bucking under him 50 feet in the air. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Below, the match blurred. Students screamed. The pitch spun. Harry couldn't see who was doing it. He could only hold on. Somewhere in the stands, Hermione's eyes narrowed. She wasn't a great flyer, but Hermione was observant in a way that bordered on terrifying. She tracked Harry's broom, then tracked the adults. Her gaze snapped to Snape. Snape sat rigid, eyes locked on Harry, lips moving. Hermione didn't hesitate. She shoved past students, ran down the stands, and acted. Not dramatically, not for attention, just decisively. Seconds later, Snape's concentration broke. Not because Hermione wanted spectacle, but because she needed him to stop focusing. Harry's broom steadied. Harry hauled himself upright with a gasp, stomach rolling with nausea and shock. And then the seeker part of his brain snapped on. Find the snitch. Finish it. Protect the win. He spotted the snitch like a flash of gold near the stands, dove without thinking, and caught it with his fingers closing hard around metal. The whistle blew. Gryffindor erupted. Harry landed, shaking, surrounded instantly by his team. People shouted his name. Hands grabbed his shoulders. Fred and George whooped like they'd personally fought Voldemort. Ron nearly tackled him. "You did it!" Ron yelled, face bright with joy. "You did it!" Harry tried to smile. He tried to let the celebration carry him, but his stomach still twisted with the memory of the broom fighting him. That night, in the common room, Hermione pushed through the crowd around Harry and Ron and said very seriously, "Snape was doing it." Ron's smile vanished. "What? I saw him," Hermione said firmly, muttering, staring at Harry, keeping eye contact. That's how broom jinxes work. Constant focus, and when his focus broke, the broom stopped bucking. Harry stared at her. "Snape tried to kill me?" Ron's face went pale with fury. "I knew it," he hissed. "I knew he was a git." Hermione's brow furrowed. "We shouldn't jump to conclusions," she said, even as her voice shook. "But it fits." Harry sat back, mind racing. Snape hated him. Snape punished him. Snape took points from him. Snape humiliated him. Now Snape might have tried to kill him. It felt too big to believe. And yet, Harry had grown up in a war's shadow. He knew adults could be cruel. He knew danger didn't always announce itself. "What do we do?" Neville asked quietly from the edge of the group, eyes wide. Harry's chest tightened. "We tell Dumbledore," he said immediately. Ron shook his head. "And say what? We think Snape is evil because he's horrible?" "No proof." Hermione's eyes sharpened. "Then we find proof," she said, and her voice carried that terrifying certainty again. So they started watching. They watched Snape's movements. They watched where he went after lessons. They watched the staff table. They watched the corridors. And they found something else. A locked door on the 3rd floor. A massive dog behind it. A 3-headed dog with eyes like coals and teeth like knives. Harry's breath caught when he saw it. It shouldn't exist in a school. It shouldn't be here. It was guarding something. "What is that?" Ron whispered, staring. "Whatever it is," Hermione breathed. "It's important." They backed away before the dog could lunge again. Harry's mind raced. A guard meant a treasure. A treasure meant a target. And Snape was always near that corridor. They didn't know what it was yet, not for weeks. Hermione dug through the library like a woman possessed, emerging with stacks of books and dirt on her hands, and ink smudged on her cheek. Ron complained constantly, but followed anyway. Harry kept thinking about his broom bucking, kept thinking about the feeling of being in the air with death beneath him. He didn't tell Molly. He couldn't. If he told Molly, she'd show up at Hogwarts and personally remove Snape's spine. And Harry wasn't sure he wanted to be the reason she stormed the castle. He did send a letter home eventually, careful and vague. The way children learned to write when they wanted to be honest but didn't want to cause panic. He wrote that he was doing well, that he'd made the team, that classes were fine. He didn't mention Snape. He didn't mention the dog. He did mention that sometimes Hogwarts felt like it was full of secrets. Arthur's reply came back the next week, shorter than usual. "Be careful. Trust your instincts. And remember, if you think something's wrong, tell an adult you trust. We love you, always." Harry read those words until the parchment felt worn. Christmas arrived like a pause button. Most students left Hogwarts. The castle emptied. Corridors echoed. The great hall felt less crowded. Harry and Ron stayed. Not because they didn't want to go home, because the Burrow was too packed during holidays, and Molly, in her practical way, had suggested the boys enjoy Christmas at Hogwarts, where there was space and food and warmth. Harry pretended he didn't mind, but on Christmas morning, when he opened a package and found a hand-knitted jumper in Gryffindor colors, he felt his throat tighten. Molly's jumpers didn't just keep you warm. They were proof you were claimed. Ron got one too. So did Percy. So did the twins. Harry's had an H stitched onto the front, not a P. Not Potter, just H. Harry. He held the jumper against his chest and blinked hard. Ron noticed and pretended not to. Hermione gave Harry a book about famous Quidditch matches. Neville gave him a box of sweets his grandmother had sent. The twins, of course, sent something ridiculous. Percy sent a letter that was mostly advice. But Molly's letter hit Harry the hardest. "Dear Harry," it said, "we hear from Percy you're doing brilliantly and also breaking rules with impressive consistency. Please remember, you have a brain and we expect you to use it. We're proud of you. We miss you. You are loved. Come home safe." Harry folded the letter carefully and put it under his pillow, like it could protect him. And maybe it did, because the moment Christmas ended, things accelerated. Hermione finally found it in a dusty book with a smug sort of triumph. "It's the Philosopher's Stone," she said, voice hushed. "Nicholas Flamel's stone. It makes the elixir of life. It turns metal to gold. It grants immortality." Ron stared. "So someone wants to steal it." Harry's stomach twisted. "Someone who wants Voldemort back," he said quietly. They looked at each other, the implication heavy and ugly. The stone wouldn't just make someone rich, it would make someone impossible to kill. It would make a return possible. And if Harry's broom had been cursed, if someone had tried to kill him, then whoever wanted the stone also wanted Harry out of the way. Because Harry Potter was still Harry Potter no matter how many Weasley jumpers he wore. They tried to tell a teacher once. They tried. They approached McGonagall, carefully, nervous and earnest. McGonagall listened, expression tightening, and then said sharply, "You are first years. The staff are handling this. Do not interfere." And they might have listened. They might have obeyed. If the night hadn't come when they realized someone was going to act right now, before the term ended, before Dumbledore could return from whatever sudden ministry trip he'd been called away on. They didn't know that Dumbledore's absence was part of the plan. They only knew they'd seen Snape moving too quickly, too urgently, toward the third-floor corridor. "We have to do something," Harry said, voice tight. Ron's face was pale. "We can't just—" "We can," Hermione cut in. "We can at least slow them down. We can at least warn someone." Neville tried to stop them. Neville, shaking, stood in the doorway of the common room and said, "You can't go. You'll get caught. You'll lose points. You'll—" Harry stared at him. "Neville," he said softly, "someone tried to kill me. Someone is trying to steal something that could bring Voldemort back. I can't do nothing." "Oh." Neville's eyes filled with tears of fear and stubbornness. Then Neville stepped aside. "I'm not saying you're right," Neville whispered. I'm not stopping you." They went. They slipped through corridors under the invisibility cloak Harry had received at Christmas, a cloak that had arrived with a note that said only, "Use it well." Harry didn't know who had sent it, but he guessed. They reached the third-floor door. Fluffy slept. Hermione used a spell to soothe the dog into deeper sleep, trembling the whole time. They slipped through the trap door beneath the dog, and everything after that felt like the castle itself was testing them. A plant that tried to strangle them. that Hermione remembered how to escape, because she'd read about it. A room full of flying keys that required Harry's reflexes and flying instincts. And for once, the thing he'd learned from Charlie became survival. A giant chessboard. Ron went still when he saw it. "This," Ron said quietly, "is my kind of nightmare." They crossed, moving like pieces, and the chess game turned real in a way that made Harry's stomach churn. When the chessmen began smashing each other, Ron's face tightened. "I know what to do," Ron said, voice low. "Harry, Hermione, listen to me." Harry didn't want to. Harry wanted to argue, to refuse, to protect Ron. But Ron's eyes were steady. Ron had always been steady when it mattered. Ron moved them into place. Then he looked at Harry and said very softly, "You have to go on." Harry's throat closed. "Ron, go," Ron snapped, forcing bravery into his voice like he always did when he was terrified. "You're not doing this alone. You're doing this because we're family. Now go." Ron made the move. The Queen struck. Ron went down. Harry's world tilted. He and Hermione ran to him. But Ron was unconscious, breathing shallow but alive. Hermione's hands shook. "We have to get help." Harry stared at Ron's pale face, guilt slicing through him. Then Harry stood. "No," Harry said quietly. "We have to stop them." Hermione's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded once because Hermione Granger was brave in her own way. "I'll go back," Hermione whispered. "I'll get a teacher. You go on." Harry hesitated. Then he nodded. He went forward alone. The troll chamber was empty, but stank of danger. The potion riddle nearly stopped him, until he remembered Hermione's voice, explaining logic puzzles, remembered her stubborn brilliance, remembered the way she always found a way. He picked the correct bottle. He drank, and he stepped through fire into the final room. The mirror of Erised stood tall and silent, and someone else was there. Not Snape. Professor Quirrell. Quirrell turned, and when he spoke, his stutter was gone. "Harry Potter," Quirrell said calmly. "Or should I say, Harry Weasley." Harry's blood went cold. Quirrell smiled. "How touching," he murmured. "A family. A home. I wonder what you'll do when I take it away." Harry raised his wand, hand shaking. "Where's the stone?" Quirrell's eyes glittered. "Hidden," he said, "protected. But not from me." Quirrell stepped closer. Harry's instincts screamed. "Snape," Harry said hoarsely. "It was you." Quirrell laughed softly. "Snape?" he repeated, amused. "Severus is so busy being bitter that he makes an excellent distraction. Everyone watches him. Everyone assumes he's the villain. And meanwhile, I, poor, stuttering, frightened Quirrell, walk wherever I like." Harry's stomach turned. All that suspicion, all that fear. Wrong target. Quirrell's smile sharpened. "The stone is in your pocket," he said quietly. Harry froze. He reached slowly and felt something hard there, as if it had been placed without him noticing. His breath hitched. The mirror had responded to him, not to greed, to intent. He'd wanted to keep the stone safe, not use it. So it had given it to him. Quirrell's eyes blazed with hunger. "Give it to me," Quirrell said, voice suddenly vicious. "Give it, boy." Harry backed away, wand up. "No." Quirrell's face twisted. "Then you die." Quirrell lunged. Harry tried to cast a spell. Quirrell grabbed him. And the moment Quirrell's hands touched Harry's skin, Quirrell screamed. Harry gasped, shocked. Quirrell's hands blistered, smoking as if burned from the inside. Quirrell recoiled. eyes wild. "What are you?" Quirrell rasped. Harry stared at his own hands, confused and terrified. Then a voice spoke, thin, cruel, ancient, not Quirrell's. From Quirrell, "Take him," the voice hissed. "Kill him." Harry's blood went ice cold. Voldemort. Not alive. Not whole, but present. Quirrell attacked again, desperation driving him. Harry tried to fight, tried to run, tried to hold on to his wand, but Quirrell grabbed him, and Harry's skin burned Quirrell again and again and again. Harry didn't understand it. He only understood that he had to survive, that he had to get the stone away. Quirrell's grip tightened, and Harry felt pain spike through his scar like lightning splitting his skull. He screamed. The room spun, and then everything went black. Harry woke in the hospital wing. White curtains, clean sheets, sunlight. For a second, he thought he was back in the burrow, small again, waking to Molly's voice. Then he saw Dumbledore sitting beside his bed, hands folded, expression tired. Harry's mouth went dry. "The stone," Harry croaked. "Destroyed," Dumbledore said gently. "It is safer that way." "And Quirrell?" "Dead," Dumbledore replied. Harry swallowed, throat tight. "Voldemort was there," he whispered. "He was—" "I know," Dumbledore said quietly. "You did very well, Harry." Harry stared at him. "Why did my touch hurt Quirrell?" Dumbledore's eyes softened, and for a moment Harry saw sadness there. "Your mother's sacrifice," he said. "Love left a mark on you, deeper than a scar. It protects you." Harry's chest tightened. "So, even though I didn't live with Petunia, the protection did not vanish," Dumbledore said carefully. "It anchored differently. It held because you were raised in a home where you were loved and where you belonged. Lily's magic did not require suffering to exist." Harry let that settle, shaky and strange. Then he remembered. "Ron," Harry blurted, trying to sit up. "Ron. He—" Dumbledore lifted a hand. "He is fine," he said. "He will wake soon. Madame Pomfrey is not easily defeated by chess pieces." Harry exhaled a breath so shaky it almost hurt. "You were very brave," Dumbledore said, after a moment, "but also very reckless." Harry looked at him, eyes burning. "Someone was trying to bring Voldemort back," he said. "What was I supposed to do?" Dumbledore's gaze held his. "Tell an adult," he said simply. "I do not say that to dismiss you. I say it because I do not want you to learn the habit of carrying danger alone." Harry's throat tightened. "I'm not alone," he whispered. "I have family," Dumbledore finished softly, and there was something like approval in his voice. "Yes, and that is your strength." Ron woke later that day, groggy and furious that he'd missed the end. "You went on without me?" Ron croaked, offended. Harry leaned over his bed. "You literally told me to," he said, voice thick. Ron blinked. Then his expression softened. "Yeah," he admitted. "I did." Hermione arrived soon after, hair wild, eyes fierce, cheeks blotchy from crying in stress. She immediately launched into a lecture about rules and danger, and how they could have died. Ron rolled his eyes. Harry listened anyway, because underneath her lecture was the truth. Hermione had come back. Hermione had tried to get help. Hermione had not abandoned them. They were 3 now, not 2, and that mattered. The end of term arrived like a blur. The House Cup ceremony took place in the Great Hall. Banners hanging, Slytherin's colors already draped proudly because they were leading. Slytherin smirked. Gryffindors grumbled. Harry sat with his stomach tight because he knew what Dumbledore was about to do, and he already felt tired of attention. Dumbledore stood, smiling pleasantly. "And now," he said, "before the feast, I have a few last-minute points to award." Harry closed his eyes briefly. He heard the announcements like a wave. Points to Ron for the best-played game of chess Hogwarts had seen in years. Points to Hermione for cool logic and bravery. Points to Neville for standing up to his friends. And points to Harry for protecting the stone. The great hall erupted as the banners changed, red and gold sweeping over green like fire catching. Gryffindor roared. Ron grabbed Harry in a fierce hug. "We did it," Ron shouted. Harry laughed, half joy, half exhaustion, because even this victory felt like it belonged to all of them, not just him. That night, on the train home, Harry watched Field slide past the window and felt something steady settle in his chest. He'd faced something terrible. He'd survived, not because he was chosen, not because he was alone and brave, because he had people who would run into danger with him, because he had family. And when the Burrow finally came into view at the end of the journey, crooked, patched, stubbornly standing, Harry felt his throat tighten again. Molly met them at the gate like she always did, eyes scanning for injuries before she even hugged them. Ron threw himself into her arms. Harry hesitated only a second before doing the same. Molly hugged him so hard, it felt like she was trying to fuse him back into the family. "You're home," she murmured fiercely. Harry swallowed. "Yeah," he whispered. "I'm home." And in that moment, even with the wider world's stories pressing at the edges, even with Voldemort's shadow still lingering somewhere out there, the truth was simple. Harry was not returning to the Burrow as a visitor. He was returning as a son. The Burrow didn't change while Harry was away. Not really. It was still crooked and crowded, and held together by stubborn magic and Arthur's refusal to let anything collapse on principle. The garden still grew too wildly. The gnomes still treated the place like it belonged to them. Molly still managed to produce meals big enough to feed an army out of a kitchen that never seemed large enough for her own family. But Harry changed. Not in the obvious ways people expected. He didn't come home swaggering, or boasting, or acting like Hogwarts had made him important. He came home quieter. He came home with a tiredness behind his eyes that Molly noticed immediately. He came home with the knowledge that Hogwarts was beautiful and dangerous at the same time, and that the world outside the Burrow could be cruel in ways that didn't always make sense. Molly hugged him at the gate, as if she could press that knowledge out of him with sheer force. "Eat," she ordered 10 minutes later, shoving a plate toward him. "You're far too thin." "I'm not," Harry began, and then stopped because arguing with Molly about food was always a losing battle. Ron had been talking nearly non-stop since they got off the train. He told the story of the stone like it was the most thrilling adventure in history, skipping the parts where Harry's broom tried to throw him to his death, skipping the parts where the air in the tunnels felt like it was trying to swallow them, skipping the cold fear of facing Voldemort's voice in Quirrell's mouth. Ron made it sound like a heroic game. Harry let him, because Ron needed it that way. Ron needed to believe they were brave and lucky and unstoppable. And Harry needed to hear Ron laugh. Because for all the noise in the Burrow, for all the warmth, Harry still woke sometimes in the night with the memory of Quirrell's hands burning, with the sound of that thin, cruel voice, with the sensation of the castle's secrets wrapping around them. The first morning home, the Daily Prophet arrived. Arthur unfolded it at breakfast, and his expression changed instantly. Molly saw it. Harry saw it too, because Harry had learned to watch adults the way children learn to watch weather. "What?" Ron asked, mouth full. Arthur didn't answer right away. He turned the newspaper slightly, and the headline hit Harry like a shove. "Boy Who Lived Saves Hogwarts. Again Harry Potter foils theft of legendary stone." A picture of Harry leaving the hospital wing sat beneath it. his face pale, his hair wild, his scar visible. The caption talked about bravery and destiny and Dumbledore's mysterious praise. It did not mention Ron. It did not mention Hermione. It did not mention Neville. It did not mention the Weasleys, except as a convenient detail, raised by the Weasley family, a line that read like a curiosity, like a footnote. Ron went quiet. Percy, returning from upstairs with his hair combed too neatly, leaned over Arthur's shoulder and made a pleased noise that Harry immediately disliked. "They're calling you a hero," Percy said, voice proud. "As they should." Harry's stomach twisted. "They're acting like I did it alone." Ron's jaw clenched. For a second, Harry thought Ron might explode. Then Ron shrugged in that forced way Ron had when he was trying to pretend something didn't bother him. "Course they would," Ron muttered. "They don't care about the rest of us." Molly's mouth tightened. "They care about stories," she said sharply, "not people." Arthur looked tired. "It'll die down," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. It didn't die down. It got worse. For the first week of summer, owls arrived constantly. Letters addressed to Harry Potter at the Burrow. Some were fan mail, childish and excited. Some were requests for interviews. Some were angry, accusing him of seeking attention. Some were political in tone, asking what Harry thought about ministry policy, as if an 11-year-old should have opinions that could steer the country. Molly burned most of them without letting Harry read them. "Not your job," she told him firmly. "Not your burden." But even Molly couldn't burn the newspaper. The prophet ran piece after piece about the stone, about Dumbledore, about rumors of you-know-who's lingering influence, about how Harry Potter seems destined to face darkness again, about how the Weasley family have become entwined with Britain's most important symbol. One columnist called them noble. Another called them opportunists. One called them the poor blood traitor family clinging to fame. That one made Arthur go very still, in a way Harry didn't like at all. Bill was home for part of the summer, and Bill had the adult skill of looking calm while quietly burning with anger. "They're doing it on purpose," Bill said one evening, voice controlled. "They're building a narrative. They want Harry to be a hero they can sell, and they want us to be either saints or villains depending on what's useful." Charlie arrived 2 days later, smelling like outdoors and dragon smoke. And the first thing he did after hugging Ron and Harry was rip a newspaper in half and throw it into the kitchen fire. "Problem solved," Charlie announced, and the twins cheered. Percy frowned. "That's wasteful." Fred leaned over. "Percy, you're wasteful." George nodded gravely. "You waste oxygen." Percy spluttered. Harry watched the bickering and felt something settle and loosen in his chest at the same time. This was still home. They still fought. They still laughed. They still acted like Harry being famous was annoying rather than sacred. But the pressure lived under everything now. It lived in the way Molly checked the ward lines more often. It lived in the way Arthur walked the perimeter of the property at night with his wand in his hand. It lived in the way Bill asked questions quietly. Who knows where Harry is? Who's been asking about him? Who's been seen near Ottery St. Catchpole? It lived in Harry's awareness that Voldemort wasn't gone the way people pretended he was gone. And it lived, too, in money. Because Hogwarts wasn't cheap. And having 2 boys the same year meant every cost doubled at once. Molly never complained in front of the children. Molly never said, "We can't." Molly said, "We'll manage." But Harry heard the quiet conversations anyway, the murmured calculations in the kitchen at night, Arthur's sigh, Molly's clipped voice, Bill offering help and being refused, Charlie offering help and being refused, Percy insisting on austerity, like it was a moral virtue, Fred and George swearing they'd make money one day and buy Molly a house made entirely of gold just to annoy her. And Harry sat in his room, sometimes staring at the ceiling and thinking about the vault, thinking about how absurd it was. Gold piled higher than he could comprehend, while Molly debated whether she could stretch flour another week. Harry tried again. He chose a quiet moment after dinner when the twins were distracted and Ron was upstairs and Arthur was fixing something that had no business being broken. Harry approached Molly at the sink. "Mum," he said. Molly didn't turn. "Yes, love, I could help," Harry said carefully. Molly's shoulders stiffened. "With money," Harry added quickly. "I could buy just small things, like better robes, a new cauldron." "Ah." Molly turned slowly and stared at him. Her eyes weren't angry. They were hurt. Not at him, at the idea, at what it meant, that an 11-year-old was trying to carry the weight of an adult world. "Oh, Harry," she said softly. Harry's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to," he began, then stopped because he was, actually. He was trying to fix what he couldn't fix. Molly stepped forward and pulled him into a hug, wet hands and all. "Dishwater be damned. You don't owe us," she murmured fiercely into his hair. "Do you hear me? You don't owe us for loving you." Harry swallowed hard. "I know," he whispered, voice cracking. "But I want to." "I know you want to," Molly said. "That's why I'm saying no." Harry pulled back just enough to look at her. "Why?" Molly took a breath like she was choosing words carefully. "Because your inheritance is not the price of your place here," she said. "Because the moment we let you start paying for things, you'll start believing love is something you have to earn with gold. And I will not let that happen." Harry's chest tightened. "But Ron is my problem," Molly said gently but firmly. "Ron's insecurities, Ron's resentment, Ron's feelings about what's fair, those are things Arthur and I will handle. Not you. You will not become the solution to Ron's pain by turning yourself into a purse." Harry flinched. Molly softened. "And also," she said quietly, "because the world is already looking for reasons to say, we used you. I won't give them one. I won't let anyone twist you into evidence." Harry stared at her. He understood, even while hating it. Molly reached up and brushed his hair back from his forehead, her touch tender. "Your job is to be a child," she said. "Your job is to grow, to learn, to be loved. Let us do the rest." Harry nodded slowly, swallowing down frustration that had nowhere to go. It didn't solve anything. It just meant the tension stayed, unspoken, simmering, especially with Ron, because Ron noticed everything, even when he pretended not to. Ron noticed the prophet. Ron noticed how some neighbors treated them differently now, either too polite or too suspicious. Ron noticed how Molly's eyes lingered on price tags. Ron noticed Harry looking guilty, and Ron, stubborn and loyal and afraid, didn't know how to talk about it without turning it into a fight. So he didn't. He acted like nothing was wrong, which meant everything was wrong in small ways. They argued more that summer, little sparks that didn't used to happen, over nothing, over whose turn it was to wash up, over who got the last biscuit, over whose wand practice had made the chickens panic. Harry could feel the fragile edge under Ron's jokes sometimes, like Ron was waiting for proof that Harry would choose Potter over Weasley the moment the world demanded it. Harry tried to prove him wrong constantly. He didn't know if it worked. Second year arrived with a different kind of dread. Not the nervous dread of the unknown, the dread of knowing Hogwarts could be dangerous and going anyway. At King's Cross, Molly hugged them longer. Arthur's hand lingered on Harry's shoulder in a way that felt like a warning. Bill and Charlie weren't there this time, busy with their own lives. Percy was already on the train somewhere, convinced he had responsibilities. Fred and George, now older and more dangerous, promised in loud voices to keep an eye on the first years, which was not reassuring. Ginny stood behind Molly, small and quiet, clutching her new school trunk like it might float away. Ginny was going to Hogwarts this year. Ginny was finally part of it. Harry watched her face flicker between excitement and terror, and something else that tightened his chest. Ginny had always been shy around him. Not around Ron. Not around the twins. Around Harry. Harry had once assumed it was because he was older than her, because he was famous, because she'd grown up hearing stories about him. But as she stood there at the platform, cheeks pink and eyes wide, Harry realized it was more complicated. Ginny wasn't staring at Harry Potter. She was staring at Harry, her brother, like she was trying to make herself brave enough to exist in the same space. Molly kissed Ginny's forehead. Right, she instructed. Eat properly. If anyone gives you trouble, I'll hex them, Ginny muttered under her breath, surprising everyone. Fred's eyes widened. Did you hear that? George beamed. That's our sister. Molly's mouth twitched. No hexing, she warned automatically, though her eyes looked proud. Then she hugged Harry. You look after them, she whispered fiercely. All of them, Ron. Ginny, I know you will. Harry swallowed. I will, he promised. Ron elbowed him. Course we will. Ginny hovered, then stepped forward awkwardly and hugged Harry very quickly, like she was afraid if she held on too long she'd dissolve. Harry froze for a half-second, then hugged her back. You'll be brilliant, he murmured. Ginny's voice was tiny. Don't say that, she whispered. Harry blinked. Why? Ginny pulled away too fast. Because you say it and it becomes true, and then everyone will expect it. She blurted, then looked horrified that she'd spoken at all. Harry stared after her, unsettled. Ron grabbed Harry's sleeve. Come on, Ron muttered. We'll find a compartment. The train journey felt more crowded this year, more familiar and less thrilling. Hermione found them faster. Neville stumbled in. Ginny got dragged into their compartment by Ron, whether she wanted to be or not, sitting rigidly with her hands in her lap, like she was attending a funeral. I don't bite, Hermione told Ginny briskly, which did not help. Ginny stared at Hermione like Hermione was a dangerous creature. Ron talked enough for everyone. Harry watched Ginny and felt a strange ache in his chest. Ginny was part of the family, but she was also part of the world that worshipped Harry in ways that made everything messy. He wondered suddenly what it was like for Ginny to be the only girl among brothers, to finally go to Hogwarts, and to do it with Harry Potter as part of her surname in the eyes of the world. He didn't ask. He didn't know how. The sorting ceremony came and went. Ginny was placed in Gryffindor, as expected, and the Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. Fred and George roared loud enough to wake the ghosts. Percy clapped like he was a proud father. Ron slapped the table and yelled, That's my sister. Ginny looked like she might faint, cheeks blazing, but her eyes shone. Harry cheered too, warm and fierce, and for a moment, second year felt like it might be normal. It wasn't, because nothing stayed normal when Harry was involved, whether he wanted it or not. The first sign was Dobby. Harry didn't understand it at first. A strange little creature showing up in his dormitory at night, eyes wide and wet, hands twisting. You must not go back to Hogwarts, Harry Potter, the creature squeaked. Harry, half asleep, stared. Ron woke instantly and sat up, hair sticking up wildly. What in Merlin's name? The creature flinched at Ron's voice. Who are you? Harry demanded, grabbing his wand. I am Dobby, the creature said, as if that explained everything. Dobby has come to save Harry Potter. Ron squinted. Save him from what? Dobby's eyes filled with tears. Terrible things, he squeaked. Horrible things. Dark things. Hogwarts is not safe. Not safe, Harry's stomach tightened. It was safe last year until... He began, then stopped, because it hadn't been safe at all. Dobby's hands trembled. Harry Potter must go home, he insisted. Harry Potter must not return. Harry's voice went flat. Home is Hogwarts and the Burrow, he said. I'm not leaving. Dobby's face crumpled with despair. Ron swung his legs out of bed, glaring. Listen, whoever you are, Ron said, voice sharp. Harry's not going anywhere. He's our brother. Dobby stared at Ron, expression twisting with something like confusion and pain. Brother, Dobby whispered, as if the word had weight. Then Dobby did something that made Harry's blood run cold. He lifted his hands, and something in the air shifted. Harry had just enough time to lunge forward. But Dobby snapped his fingers. The next thing Harry knew, he was in trouble for something that wasn't his fault. Again, a ridiculous chain of events involving a floating object, loud noise, and a teacher's anger. It felt like a warning, like Hogwarts itself was starting the year, by reminding Harry that it could control the story whenever it wanted. Harry tried to tell adults. McGonagall dismissed it. The staff looked busy. Dumbledore looked concerned but distant. It wasn't that they didn't believe him, not fully. It was that they were always dealing with something, always carrying the weight of a school full of children, in a world teetering on old war scars. Harry told Ron and Hermione everything. Ron muttered about weird house elves. Hermione got fascinated in a way that was deeply unhelpful. House elves have complex magical bonds, she said excitedly. If one is warning you. Ron groaned. Here we go. Then things started happening. The first message appeared on the wall in the corridor one evening, written in something that looked far too much like blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Harry's stomach turned to ice. Students stared. Whispers exploded. Teachers arrived, faces tight. The whole school felt like it leaned toward panic in one collective movement. Ron looked sick. Hermione looked pale. Ginny, who had come along behind them, stared at the message with wide eyes, and then abruptly turned away, swallowing hard. Harry noticed. He filed it away. The first attack came soon after. A student found stiff and unmoving, eyes wide, body frozen, as if life had left them without death. Petrified. The word spread through the castle like disease. Petrified students. Fear. Rumors. And then, as if the year wanted to be crueler, Harry discovered he could speak Parseltongue. It happened at the dueling club, because of course it did. Because Gilderoy Lockhart, their new defense teacher, was incompetent enough to turn everything into a performance, and arrogant enough to believe the school needed him to be a celebrity. Lockhart strutted and preened, and told stories that were clearly borrowed. Snape stood beside him, looking like he wanted to commit murder. The students gathered excited at first. Then Lockhart tried to demonstrate dueling, and made everything worse. A snake appeared on the floor. Real. Thick-bodied. Dangerous. Students screamed. Harry's body went cold with instinctive recognition he didn't understand. The snake hissed, and Harry understood it. Clear as if the words were English. Clear as if he'd always known. He stepped forward without thinking. He spoke. The snake listened, and the room fell into a silence so sharp it hurt. Ron stared at Harry like he'd never seen him before. Hermione went rigid. Draco Malfoy's face lit up with a horrible kind of triumph, because everyone knew Parseltongue meant something. It meant Slytherin. It meant dark magic. It meant Voldemort. And within an hour, the rumors were everywhere. Potter's the heir of Slytherin. Potter opened the chamber. Potter's attacking Muggleborns. Harry tried to laugh it off at first. He tried to reason with people. He tried to explain he hadn't known. He hadn't asked for it. It just happened. No one cared. They had a story now, and stories were easier than complicated truth. Muggleborns started avoiding him. Some purebloods looked at him with interest rather than fear, as if they were curious what kind of weapon he might become. Even some Gryffindors looked uneasy. Harry had never been lonely like he'd been at the Dursleys, but Hogwarts managed to create a loneliness anyway, surrounded by people, watched constantly, and still somehow isolated by the shape of rumors. The Weasleys rallied around him like a storm. Percy, obnoxious Percy, stood in a corridor and publicly snapped at students to stop whispering. "If you continue spreading baseless accusations," Percy said loudly, "I will report you. And yes, I will make it official. And yes, I will enjoy it." Fred and George began hexing anyone who called Harry the heir within their hearing. Nothing permanent. Molly's influence had limits, but humiliating enough. Ron took it personally. "Say it again," Ron told a group of Slytherins one evening, wand out, voice shaking with fury. "Say it again and I'll—" Harry grabbed Ron's arm. "Don't," he said quietly. Ron's eyes were fierce. "You're my brother," Ron hissed. "They don't get to talk about you like you're some monster." Harry stared at Ron and felt something warm and painful in his chest. Hermione tried to logic the situation into submission by reading everything she could find about Parseltongue, the Chamber, Hogwarts history, and basilisks. She carried books like armor. Ginny went quieter. That was the part that worried Harry most. Ginny stopped making eye contact in the common room. Ginny jumped when people spoke too loudly. Ginny's laughter, when it happened at all, felt forced. Harry tried to ask Ron about it once. Ron shrugged. "She's just nervous," he said. "First year, and all this rubbish happening. She'll be fine." But Harry remembered Ginny on the platform, whispering, "Don't say I'll be brilliant, because then people will expect it." Harry remembered Ginny's face when the message appeared. Harry started watching her more closely. And then Hermione was attacked. Hermione, who had been determined to prove Harry's innocence with pure research, was found petrified in the library. Harry stood over her stiff body and felt something inside him crack. Hermione's hand was curled around a torn page. Ron's face went grey. Harry's chest felt too tight to breathe. Hermione had been trying to help him, and something, had attacked her anyway. "This ends," Harry said, voice hoarse. Ron looked at him, eyes wide and wet. "Harry." "This ends," Harry repeated, and now his voice had the kind of steadiness Harry usually heard in Arthur when he was furious. They studied the page. It described a basilisk, a giant serpent, a monster that killed with its gaze, that moved through pipes. That petrified those who saw it indirectly. Harry felt cold understanding slide into place. The voices. He'd been hearing voices in the walls all year. Cold, hissing words no one else could hear. He hadn't told anyone at first, because the last thing he needed was more reasons for people to stare at him. But now, it made horrible sense. The monster was speaking, and he was the only one who could understand it. Ginny vanished a week later. A message appeared. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. Ron didn't breathe. For a second, he simply stood there staring at the words. Then he made a sound that didn't quite qualify as a word, and bolted. Harry chased him through corridors, heart pounding, stomach rolling, because Ginny wasn't just Ron's sister. She was Harry's sister, too. Not by blood, by choice, by years, by love. Ginny, who had once hugged him too fast because she was afraid to exist near him. Ginny, who had grown up in his shadow and still tried to love him anyway. And now, Ginny was gone. "We're going after her," Ron said, when Harry caught him, voice shaking violently. "We're going now," Harry nodded. Yes. They went to Lockhart because he was the adult who was supposed to handle this. Lockhart preened and panicked, and then tried to run. Ron and Harry didn't let him. They dragged him to Myrtle's bathroom, because Hermione's earlier research, combined with the basilisk page, had pointed them toward the truth. The sink, the snake engraving, the hidden entrance. Harry spoke Parseltongue. The entrance opened, and the way Ron looked at Harry in that moment, no fear, no suspicion, only trust, made Harry's throat tighten. They descended into darkness, pipes and stone, wet air, echoes. Lockhart tried to obliviate them. Ron's wand, still unreliable and damaged from earlier misfortune, backfired. Lockhart's spell hit him instead. Lockhart crumpled, eyes vacant, smiling stupidly. Ron stared at him with disgust. Idiot. Harry didn't have time to care. Ginny was below. They ran through the tunnels. They found the chamber, and Ginny lay on the stone floor, pale and still, as if all the life had been drained from her. "Ginny," Ron choked, dropping to his knees beside her. Harry moved too, heart hammering. But then a voice spoke, smooth, young, amused. "You won't wake her," the voice said. Harry turned. A boy stood there with dark hair and a handsome face that made Harry's skin crawl with instinct he didn't understand. The boy smiled. "Hello, Harry Potter," he said softly. "Or, should I say, Harry Weasley." Harry's blood went cold. Ron stared, confused. "Who are you?" The boy ignored Ron. His gaze was fixed on Harry, like Harry was the only person in the room worth speaking to. "I'm Tom Riddle," the boy said, voice calm. "And you've been very easy to predict." Harry's wand came up automatically. "You did this," Harry said, voice shaking with rage. "You took Ginny." Tom smiled wider. "Ginny gave herself to me," he said softly. "She poured her heart into my diary. She told me everything." Ron made a strangled noise. "Diary." Harry's head snapped to Ginny's limp hand. He remembered seeing her writing sometimes. He remembered her hiding something quickly. He remembered her flinching when he walked into rooms. Guilt slammed into him. Tom continued, delighted. "She was lonely," he said. "Can you blame her? 7 brothers, and then the most famous boy in Britain becomes one of them. How could she ever feel special?" Harry's stomach twisted. Ron's face went white with horror. Tom's eyes gleamed. "She wanted to matter," he said. "She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be chosen. And I chose her." Harry's hands shook. "You used her," Harry hissed. Tom tilted his head. "I taught her," he corrected. "I guided her. I gave her purpose. I gave her attention no one else bothered to give." "That's a lie," Ron snarled. Tom laughed softly. "Is it?" he asked. "She adored Harry Potter. She wrote about him constantly, about how he was brave and special, and everyone loved him, about how she was just Ginny Weasley, the little sister, the afterthought." Harry felt sick. He looked down at Ginny's face and saw the truth in the parts he hadn't wanted to see. Ginny had been drowning in a family that loved her, but didn't always notice her because the family was too large and too loud and too busy surviving. And Harry had been another loud presence, another center of gravity. Tom's smile sharpened. "She opened the chamber for me," he said. "She wrote the messages. She let the basilisk out. She didn't remember doing it. That's the beauty of it." Ron looked like he might tear Tom apart with his hands. Harry's voice came out low and deadly. "She's my sister," he said, "and you don't get to hurt my family." Tom's eyes flickered. "Your family," he repeated, amused. "You cling to them as if they can save you from what you are." Harry didn't understand what he meant. Then Tom spoke a name that made everything freeze. Voldemort. Ron flinched. Even here, even in the chamber, Ron flinched. Harry didn't. Because Harry had said the name before, and because something in him already knew. Tom's smile turned sharp and cruel. "I am Voldemort," he said softly. "I am what he was before he became what the world feared. I am memory. I am the beginning." Harry's skin went cold. The basilisk rose behind the statue of Salazar Slytherin, like a nightmare unfolding. Its scales glinted. Its eyes were death. Harry's body moved before his mind did. "Look away," Harry shouted. Ron grabbed Ginny's limp body and turned his face away instinctively, eyes squeezed shut. Harry stared at the basilisk's body, not its eyes, trying to keep his focus while terror threatened to drown him. Tom's voice was delighted. "Kill him," he murmured. The basilisk lunged. Harry dove aside. Stone shattered where it struck. Harry's wand flashed. Spells hit scales and slid off like rain. The basilisk's mouth opened, and Harry saw the fangs, longer than knives. Harry ran. He used the pillars, the shadows, the shapes of the chamber. He tried to think like Charlie had taught him. Big creatures have patterns. They have blind spots. They can be outmaneuvered if you stay alive long enough to learn the rhythm. But this wasn't a dragon. This was a monster built for murder. Harry's breath came fast. His heart hammered. Then something flashed through the air. A bird, golden and blazing. Fawkes. Dumbledore's phoenix. Relief hit Harry so hard it almost made him dizzy. Fawkes landed on the basilisk's head and attacked its eyes, pecking viciously. The basilisk screamed, thrashing. It couldn't see. Tom's smile faltered for the first time. Fawkes dropped something onto the floor beside Harry. A hat, the sorting hat. Harry stared for half a second, confused. Then he understood. He shoved his hand into the hat. His fingers closed around something cold and solid. He pulled it free. A sword, silver, gleaming, heavy with history. Gryffindor's sword. Harry gripped it with both hands and felt the weight of every story the Weasleys had ever told about Gryffindor bravery. He didn't feel like a legend. He felt like a boy protecting his sister. The basilisk lunged again, blind but furious. Harry moved forward instead of away. He raised the sword. The basilisk's mouth opened. Harry drove the blade upward with everything he had. The sword pierced the roof of the basilisk's mouth and sank deep. The basilisk convulsed. Harry held on, jaw clenched, arms screaming with strain. Then pain exploded in his arm. A fang pierced him, sharp and deep. Venom surged like fire. Harry yanked the sword free and stumbled back, vision blurring. The basilisk collapsed, body shuddering, then went still. Harry's knees hit the stone. His arm burned like it was being melted from the inside. Tom stepped forward, face bright with triumph again. "You're dying," he observed calmly. Harry's breath came in shallow gasps. His fingers went numb. Ron's voice cracked. Harry. Harry turned his head toward Ron and Ginny. He tried to speak. He couldn't. Venom was fast. Tom's smile widened. "And when you die," he said softly, "Ginny dies too, because she gave me her life. And I will return." Harry's gaze dropped to the diary lying near the statue. Black cover. Ordinary looking. Evil in its simplicity. The source. The anchor. Harry dragged himself toward it, arms screaming, vision narrowing. Tom noticed, too late. "No," Tom hissed, lunging. Harry grabbed the basilisk fang lodged near him, slick with venom. With shaking hands, with his remaining strength, Harry drove it into the diary. Ink burst out like blood. Tom screamed, not a human scream, a tearing sound, like something ripping apart. Tom's image twisted, flailing, dissolving. His face turned desperate and furious. "You," he choked, voice breaking, "you don't understand what you've done." "I understand," Harry managed, voice rough. "You don't touch my family." Tom vanished. The diary lay ruined. Harry sagged. His arm was on fire. His heartbeat felt wrong. He was dying anyway. Fawkes landed beside him and made a soft sound that felt like grief and determination. Then warm tears fell onto Harry's wound. Heat spread through him. Not burning, not venom, healing. The pain eased. Harry gasped, shocked. His vision cleared slowly. He flexed his fingers. He was alive. Ron made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Harry dragged himself towards Ginny. Ginny's eyes fluttered open. Confused, frightened. "Ron," she whispered. Ron grabbed her so gently, it looked like it hurt him. "You're okay," he said fiercely, voice breaking. "You're okay. You're safe." Ginny's eyes moved to Harry. Her face crumpled with shame. Harry's chest tightened. "Not your fault," he said immediately, voice hoarse. "None of this is your fault." Ginny shook her head weakly. She whispered, tears spilling. "I wrote." Harry leaned closer. "You were tricked," he said, voice firm. "You were used. You're not guilty. You're our sister. We're taking you home." Ginny made a broken sound and clung to Ron. Harry's throat tightened. He looked at Ron, and for the first time all year, the money and the fame and the jealousy didn't exist in the space between them. There was only terror and relief and love. They returned to the school, shaken and filthy and alive. Dumbledore's eyes were grave when Harry told him about Tom Riddle, about the diary, about the way it had preserved a version of Voldemort. "A Horcrux," Dumbledore said quietly, and the word felt heavy, like a stone dropping into deep water. "A fragment of soul, bound to an object." Harry stared. "So Voldemort did this to himself," he whispered. "He tore his soul apart." Dumbledore's gaze held his. "Yes," he said softly, "and that means defeating him will never be simple." Lucius Malfoy was confronted. The diary's path was traced. The truth came out in pieces, the way ugly truths always did. But the hardest aftermath was not political. It was personal. Ginny came back to the Burrow that summer quieter than before. Molly held her for long stretches and cried in a way Ginny would pretend not to notice. Arthur looked older. Ron was protective to the point of anger, snapping at anyone who looked at Ginny the wrong way. Fred and George were gentler than Harry had ever seen them, hovering near Ginny like they didn't trust the world not to steal her again. And Harry carried guilt like a weight in his ribs, because Tom Riddle had used Ginny's loneliness, Ginny's insecurity, Ginny's feeling of being invisible. And Harry Harry had been part of the shadow she lived under, even if he never meant to be. One evening, Harry found Ginny sitting on the garden step, staring into the dark. He sat beside her quietly. Ginny didn't look up. "I'm sorry," Harry said. Ginny's head snapped toward him. "Don't," she whispered fiercely. Harry swallowed. "I should have noticed," he said. "I should have—" "You're not responsible for my feelings," Ginny said, voice shaking. "You're not responsible for me being stupid enough to write in some diary." "You weren't stupid," Harry said. Ginny's eyes filled with tears. "I was lonely," she admitted, voice small. "And I hated that I was lonely, because I had all of you. I hated that I could still feel invisible in my own family." Harry's chest tightened. Ginny stared down at her hands. "And I hated that I loved you," she whispered, cheeks flushing with shame. "Not like that," she flailed for words. Mortified. "Not like that. Just you. You were my brother, but also Harry Potter. Everyone cared about you, and I cared about you too, and I felt pathetic." Harry swallowed hard. He didn't know what to do with that confession, so he did the only thing that mattered. He said quietly, "I care about you." Ginny's mouth trembled. "I know," she whispered. "I know you do. That's why I'm angry at myself. Not you." Harry nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, voice rough. "Then we'll be angry at the right person." Ginny looked at him, confused. Harry's gaze went hard. "Voldemort," he said. "Tom Riddle. Whoever thinks they can hurt you again." Ginny's shoulders sagged, and for a second she looked younger than 11 should ever look. Then she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Harry sat with her until the sun went down, and Molly called them in for dinner. It didn't fix everything. Ginny's trauma didn't vanish because Harry sat beside her. Ron's protectiveness didn't soften overnight. The Burrow didn't suddenly become a place without shadows. But something shifted, because Ginny had spoken the truth instead of swallowing it, because Harry had listened instead of trying to solve it with guilt, because the family, chaotic and imperfect and fierce, had survived something that could have destroyed them. And Harry knew, in a way he hadn't known before, that being a Weasley didn't just mean laughter and warmth. It meant standing in the aftermath of horror and still choosing each other. It meant rebuilding. It meant not letting shame make someone alone. The summer ended with the Burrow still standing, still crooked, still full, and Harry, lying in his bed, listening to Ron's breathing in the bed beside him, realized that danger wasn't just something that happened at Hogwarts. Danger could reach into the family itself. That was what made it terrifying. That was also what made it worth protecting.